Chapter 551. Ning Shu would only see Mu Qing at night and bring her back to the cold palace when the sun was about to rise. He didn't care how Mu Qing lived her life. He didn't care if she had enough to eat in the cold palace or not. In fact, Mu Qing was a very smart person. She had her own way of surviving in the cold palace. Mu Qing didn't dare to talk about this. She didn't dare to say that the Empress made her read memorials every night and taught her how to rule the country. Mu Qing didn't know what the old witch meant, but she knew that if she talked about this, she would die without a burial place. Especially when there was still a crown prince. The old witch was putting herself on the fire. Mu Qing was trembling in fear even when she was in the cold palace. Ning Shu was quite satisfied with Mu Qing's reaction. If Mu Qing was arrogant, or if she wanted to show off, Ning Shu wouldn't have paid any attention to her. One must always be vigilant at all times. Ning Shu felt that she was suffering because she was not vigilant enough. Otherwise, she would not have been cursed by others and would not be in such a miserable state. The most depressing thing was 2333, the system. He didn't even tell him when he encountered cursed things. This thing doesn't even have a trace. I can't catch it at all. Don't push the blame to me. 2333 said unhappily. Ning Shu, it was Lolo's fault for being useless. Ning Shu felt that he was going to die soon because he couldn't walk at all. All the blood vessels in his body were bulging. His body was bruised. The rhythm of his heartbeat was completely messed up. Lu Changqing came to see Ning Shu. Seeing Ning Shu sitting on the chair without moving, he walked to Ning Shu's side and said, "Your Majesty, your body is unwell. Call the imperial doctor over." "I'm fine," Ning Shu said indifferently as he looked at the memorial in front of him. Lu Zhangqing reached out to hold Ning Shu's hand. Lu Zhangqing's fingers were long and slender, which made Ning Shu's hands even more pale. Ning Shu wanted to pull his hand back, but Lu Zhangqing held it. "Your Majesty, you are avoiding Zhangqing." "No." Ning Shu didn't want to have anything to do with Lu Changqing. Lu Changqing Ning Shu asked, "Your Majesty, are we going to Phoenix Perch Palace tonight?" Ning Shu said, "I'm busy with government affairs, so I won't be going." Lu Changqing smiled elegantly. "Your Majesty, please take care of your health." Ning Shu nodded. Lu Changqing bowed and turned to leave. He slowly walked away, his temperament elegant. He finally left. Ning Shu spat out a mouthful of blood. He was so annoyed that Lu Changqing kept showing his presence. What was he trying to do? Ning Shu had just spat out blood when Lu Changqing came back. Ning Shu was so scared that he almost spat out blood again. Ning Shu's face twitched as he looked at Lu Changqing. He quickly asked, "Phoenix Empress, what are you?" Lu Changqing said, "From today onwards, Changqing will live with your Majesty and take care of your Majesty's health." Ning Shu, fuck, living together is too much. Ning Shu said coldly, "I don't need the Phoenix Empress to take care of me. I know my own health very well." "Your Majesty, you don't know." Lu Changqing shook his head. "I already said that I don't need your care. If you really have so much free time, then teach your daughter well. Look at the things she does." "I don't even want to say anything," Ning Shu said coldly. Lu Changqing pursed his lips. A trace of hurt flashed across his face. In the end, he said, "Your Majesty, why are you always so dissatisfied with Xue?" Dissatisfied? If Mu Xue was still the original Mu Xue, Ning Shu would have given her the throne. But now, Mu Xue's body was that of a man, and he seemed to be a mission enforcer. She had cursed him so viciously. Even if he had to use his last bit of strength, he had to drag someone down with him. The current situation was just like the plot. She was the same as Mu Nishang. In the end, she had to remove Mu Xue from the throne. Even if she couldn't, she wouldn't let Mu Xue become the empress so easily. I love her deeply. It's not that I'm dissatisfied with her, but the things she does always disappoint me. Mu Yao died because of her, but she doesn't have a trace of remorse. Instead, she threatened me to depose her. Is this an attitude of remorse? She's threatening me, Ning Shu said coldly. Don't bother me. I don't need you to take care of me. Ning Shu waved his hand. I have to deal with political matters. The imperial harem is not allowed to interfere. Phoenix Empress, are you going to watch me deal with political matters? Lu Chongqing pursed his lips and said, it's Chongqing who has overstepped. Lu Chongqing bowed to Ning Shu and turned to leave. His back looked a little sad. Ning Shu didn't care at all. Help me to lie down on the bed. Ning Shu sat on the chair. His lower body didn't feel anything at all. It was as if it was numb. Even his blood didn't flow. Ning Shu chanted the clear heart incantation and fell asleep in a daze. When he woke up, Autumn Maid was standing beside the bed with a teacup in her hand. She said to Ning Shu, Your Majesty, there are bad rumors outside. Ning Shu's heart was calm. He took a sip of tea. What's the matter? There are rumors outside that Your Majesty's body can't take it anymore. Soon, you'll die. Autumn Maid knelt on the ground. Your Majesty, I swear that I didn't say anything. I've also warned my subordinates repeatedly. I don't know how the news got out. Ning Shu didn't care too much. There was no wall in the world that didn't have a crack. If he could hide it for a while, he would hide it for a while. Ning Shu didn't think that he could hide it forever. He went to court with his exhausted body. As a result, just as his butt touched the dragon throne, a group of ministers began to ask Ning Shu to take care of his body. They blabbered on and on. Then, they asked Ning Shu to release the crown princess from her confinement and let the crown princess govern the country. Ning Shu had the same expression from beginning to end, she was poisoned and couldn't take it anymore. It was probably because of Mu Shui's confinement. She couldn't even stay idle after being confined for half a month. This rumor was probably spread by Mu Shui. My body is very good. When I really die, I'll let her out to govern the country and be the empress. Ning Shu threw out a sentence and left. Ning Shu felt that he didn't have much time left. If nothing unexpected happened, he would definitely die within 10 days. Perhaps it was because of the final radiance of light. Ning Shu felt that his body didn't hurt as much and his spirit was quite good. At night, he stepped up his efforts to teach Mu Qing. Ning Shu only stuffed all the things in the original owner's head to Mu Qing. As for whether Mu Qing could understand, it was none of her business. Mu Qing was much calmer when she saw Ning Shu now. At least, she restrained her anger into her bones. She didn't call Ning Shu Mother Empress, but Your Majesty. Are you really going to die? Mu Qing looked at Ning Shu and asked. Ning Shu glanced at Mu Qing and spat a mouthful of black blood into the spittoon. Then, he said, How long do you think I can live like this? Mu Qing, damn, it was so creepy. How could she say that he was going to die so easily? Old Witch. Chapter 552. Mu Qing looked at Ning Shu with a conflicted expression and asked, Aren't you the empress? Why don't you find an imperial physician and let him take a look at your body? It would be a waste of time. Anyway, she can't be saved, so there's no need to waste time. Ning Shu said indifferently. I have already drafted the imperial edict to pass on the throne. Ning Shu handed Mu Qing a commander's seal. This is the commander's seal to mobilize the imperial guards of Xian City. I will think of a way to deal with the crown princess. If I don't have enough time, I will have to rely on you to fight with her. If you can't win and die, then you deserve it. Mu Qing was speechless. A woman's heart is the most vicious. She dragged me into this war and then killed me. How can this be compared to cheating others? Tomorrow, I will put you in front of everyone. From now on, you will be the 5th imperial daughter, Mu Qing. Ning Shu paused for a moment, took a breath and said, prepare well. Mu Qing pursed her lips. Even if you do this, I still hate you in my heart. Whether you hate me or not is none of my business. If you want to hate me, then hate me. Ning Shu didn't really care. Mu Qing's heart was filled with helplessness. How can there be such a person? The next day, during the morning court, Ning Shu's hand was holding Mu Qing's hand. Mu Qing was wearing a brocade dress and looked more imposing than before. She also looked more beautiful. The Empress suddenly brought a woman with her. The expressions of the ministers were all uncertain as they looked at Mu Qing. Ning Shu directly said, this is the 5th imperial daughter, Mu Qing. She has been living in the cold palace since she was young. Now, I have added her name to the imperial family's genealogy. The ministers all knelt down and said congratulations. However, no one knew what they were thinking. In any case, Mu Qing walked into the sight of the ministers. After announcing Mu Qing's identity, everything had to be done according to the rules. Ning Shu didn't arrange a luxurious palace for Mu Qing. Instead, he found a palace beside the cold palace for her to live in. When the Empress residence was built, she would move out. With such an attitude, the others couldn't tell if Ning Shu liked Mu Qing or if he didn't care about this newly minted 5th daughter at all. Ning Shu gave all his power to Mu Qing. If Mu Qing still couldn't defeat Mu Shui, then Ning Shu wouldn't be able to do anything about it. Ning Shu didn't expect to complete this quest in the first place. The rumors outside grew more and more intense, and they all said that Her Majesty the Empress would not live for much longer. The civil and military officials repeatedly begged Ning Shu to release Mu Shui, who was under house arrest, to govern the empire. Ning Shu sat calmly on Mount Tai, completely ignoring these people. I'm about to die, why should I be afraid of you? If you want to die, then it's even better. We'll all die together. None of these ministers were willing to die. Now that Ning Shu was nearing the end of her reign, they wanted to curry favor with her. Can you get an imperial physician to take a look? Every time Mu Qing saw the old witch's half-dead appearance in front of her, she felt incomparably terrified and disgusted. This was especially so when she saw the old witch vomiting blood without batting an eyelid. It was simply challenging Mu Qing's fragile nerves. Ning Shu wiped the black blood from the corner of his mouth with a handkerchief and said indifferently, once you ascend the throne, you can deal with the people on this list as you see fit. Mu Qing curled her lips and said sarcastically, why do you think I'll ascend the throne? Look at how confident you are. Don't forget that you still have a legitimate successor. Then return the commander's seal to me. Ning Shu glanced at Mu Qing, and Mu Qing immediately said, you're the Empress. How can you be so capricious? How can you have the nerve to ask for something you've given to someone else? TSK, how pretentious. Ning Shu rolled his eyes. I don't know what you're thinking, but you're still acting like this. Since you want to be the Empress, you should understand your responsibilities. Mu Qing, old witch. Is there really no cure for your illness? Mu Qing bit her lip and asked. I didn't see you take any medicine, and I didn't see you call the imperial physician. Don't give up on yourself. Ning Shu was speechless. If she could be cured, why would she give up on treatment? Ning Shu vomited a mouthful of black blood. The black blood was faintly smelly. His internal organs were probably starting to rot. You haven't seen your eldest sister yet, right? I'll take you to see her. Ning Shu looked at Mu Qing as he spoke. He had a faint plan in his mind. Mu Qing almost jumped up. She couldn't help but say, what are you up to? You want me to see the crown princess? Are you trying to draw the crown princess's attention to me? I won't go. Facing the crown princess makes my heart tremble. Pack up. In 2 days, you'll go to the crown princess's residence. You want to be the empress with this little courage? How are you going to face the civil and military officials in the future? Ning Shu closed his eyes and silently chanted the clear heart mantra. Mu Qin could only let out a long sigh. She turned around and angrily walked away. Autumn Maid's eyes were red. She wiped away the yellow sweat on Ning Shu's forehead for him. Your Majesty, Ning Shu opened his eyes and coldly said, I don't have many days left. I will tell Mu Qin to take good care of you. Autumn Maid knelt on the ground and kowtowed. Let me follow you, Your Majesty. When we are underground, I will still serve you. Don't be like this. I want to live more than anyone else. If you can live, then live. Don't die. Autumn Maid was truly loyal to Mu Nishang. Autumn Maid should be given a good old age. Thank you, Your Majesty. Autumn Maid stood up, wiping away her tears. Ning Shu ate a fasting pill to ensure his body had enough energy. Fortunately, Ning Shu always exchanged for necessities before entering a mission. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to last until now. Ning Shu lay on the bed. These few days when he was about to die allowed Ning Shu to sleep very well. He didn't know how long he slept. When he opened his eyes, he saw Lu Changqing's elegant face. When Ning Shu moved his body, black blood surged up his throat. Because Lu Changqing was beside him, Ning Shu tried his best to swallow the blood in his throat. However, blood still flowed out from the corner of his mouth. Lu Changqing saw the blood at the corner of Ning Shu's mouth. He took out a neatly folded handkerchief and wiped Ning Shu's mouth. He said in a sorrowful tone, Your Majesty, you vomited blood. Ning Shu was speechless. Of course, he knew that he vomited blood. Ning Shu sat up with difficulty and said coldly, I vomited for fun. Lu Changqing put away the bloody handkerchief and said in a strange tone, Nishang, why are you always so stubborn? Ning Shu, call me Your Majesty. Lu Changqing took out a sandalwood box and opened it. There were a few small pills in the box that emitted a medicinal smell. Ning Shu smelled the medicinal smell and wanted to analyze what kind of pill it was. However, she could only smell a faint smell. Her sense of smell had already been destroyed. This curse didn't just cause pain. It had developed to the point where one would lose all 5 senses. Now, Ning Shu's vision had developed to the point where she couldn't differentiate between humans and beasts from 10 meters away. Her nose could only smell very faint smells. Therefore, she had no way of knowing if this pill was poison. Ning Shu looked at Lu Changqing warily and said, I have political matters to attend to. Phoenix Empress, you can leave first. Lu Changqing looked at Ning Shu. Your Majesty, don't use this excuse every time. Chapter 553. Ning Shu didn't know why Lu Zhangqing brought the pill over. Could it be that he wanted to poison her to death? In her current state, it would be a waste to feed her poison. She didn't have many days left to live, but she still had something to do. She couldn't die now. Maid Qiu, Maid Qiu. Ning Shu called out for Maid Qiu. Lu Zhangqing saw the vigilance on Ning Shu's face and frowned. He said coldly, Your Majesty, Zhangqing asked Maid Qiu to prepare hot water. Your Majesty can wash up when you wake up. Ning Shu became even more vigilant. He looked at Lu Zhangqing and said coldly, What is the Phoenix Empress doing? Lu Zhangqing laughed deeply. This was the first time Ning Shu heard him laugh. There was a hint of sadness in his laughter. He said, Mu Nishang, I really hate you. Ning Shu was expressionless. He hated Mu Nishang. What did it have to do with her? However, Lu Zhangqing didn't seem normal now. Ning Shu shrank to the corner of the bed and said indifferently, Phoenix Empress, what do you mean? Do you hate me? Lu Zhangqing had an elegant smile on his face. He took out a pill and placed it by Ning Shu's mouth. He said, Your Majesty, take the medicine. No, I'm not taking it. Ning Shu turned his head away. Lu Zhongqing wasn't angry. He turned Ning Shu's face. Your Majesty, this is the antidote. You've been poisoned. Oh my God. Ning Shu felt that his brain wasn't enough. She's been poisoned. Wasn't she cursed? Could it be that she was cursed and poisoned again? Both father and daughter poisoned her at the same time. Ning Shu was speechless. Poisoned? How could I be poisoned? Ning Shu shook his head. I'm not taking this pill. Lu Zhongqing pursed his lips and took a pill for himself. Then, he took another pill and brought it to Ning Shu's mouth. Ni Shang, take the pill and your body will naturally recover. You poison me? Ning Shu looked at Lu Chongqing. Ning Shu thought for a while but still couldn't figure out how Lu Chongqing poisoned him. Could it be a tonic soup? Ning Shu remembered that he drank a mouthful of the tonic soup. Although Lu Chongqing drank more than half a bowl, he still had the antidote in his hands. Lu Zhongqing did not refute. He only said, Your Majesty, take the pill. Ning Shu was cursing in his heart. Could life be a little more bitter? However, the poison that Lu Chongqing had given her had been neutralized. After all, she had taken the antidote. Why did you poison me? Is it because of the crown princess? Ning Shu asked Lu Zhongqing. He guessed that Lu Zhongqing had been reborn. Lu Chongqing held the pill in his hand and said gently, Your Majesty, take the pill. Chongqing will tell you why. Ning Shu swallowed the pill. Even if it was poison, she still had the antidote. Phoenix Queen, pour me a cup of water. Ning Shu looked at Lu Chongqing. I'm thirsty. Lu Chongqing turned around to pour tea for Ning Shu. Ning Shu immediately stuffed the antidote into his mouth. Who knew if it was the antidote or poison? Ning Shu did not trust Lu Chongqing from beginning to end. Lu Chongqing brought the teacup to Ning Shu's mouth. Your Majesty, have some tea. Ning Shu took a sip and did not drink any more. He asked, Now, you should tell me when you poisoned me. Why did you poison me? Lu Chongqing lowered his eyes slightly and looked at the white porcelain teacup in his hand. He said calmly, Your Majesty, I had a dream. I dreamed that I was sent to the cold palace by Your Majesty. Your Majesty killed the crown princess. Lu Chongqing looked up at Ning Shu. Your Majesty, this dream was very real. When I woke up, my heart was filled with hatred and resentment. When I was in the most pain, I poisoned Your Majesty. Ning Shu, so, you wanted to take revenge on me. Why are you giving me the antidote now? What was the point of being so fickle? The heavens had given him a second life, so he should strive for it. If he wanted to take revenge, he should take it. Lu Chongqing said calmly, When I hated you the most, I poisoned Your Majesty when I woke up from the dream. What I want to see the most is Your Majesty dying slowly and being tortured to death. This poison will slowly drain a person's spirit until they die of convulsions. Even though he was speaking viciously, Lu Chongqing's voice was still very elegant. Ning Shu was expressionless. When did you poison me? From when you ate the pill, Lu Chongqing said calmly. This meant that Lu Chongqing had already poisoned Mu Nishang before she had even entered the mission. No wonder she felt so uncomfortable when she entered this body. Her pulse was also weak. She had thought that it was because she ate too many pills, but it turned out that there was something else in the pill. Ning Shu pursed her lips. If Lu Chongqing was not the mission enforcer, then the mission enforcer must be the person in Mu Shue's body. Ning Shu had been thinking about how she had come into contact with the carrier of the curse. Now that she thought about it, Mu Shui had also given her a box of pills. She must have been cursed at that time. They poisoned her at the same time and used pills at the same time. Ning Shu lit a candle for herself. She had suffered this pain for Mu Nishang. Why are you giving me the antidote now? Ning Shu asked Lu Chongqing. Wasn't this unnecessary? Lu Chongqing frowned. Your Majesty, I don't hate you now. I hate myself. I hate myself for not being ruthless enough. I hate you for hurting me and the Crown Princess, but in the end, you realized that you were the one who was torturing yourself. Ning Shu was speechless. Fuck, why did he have to use it? He had to use a strong one. One dose and she would die. He didn't have to regret it. When a person lost their rationality due to hatred, they would gnash their teeth and wish for nothing more than to destroy the world. However, as time passed, this hatred would gradually begin to disappear. So Lu Chongqing regretted it now and wanted to use the antidote to save her. But in a few days, she would still be dead. Your Majesty, the hot water is ready. Autumn Maid walked in and bowed to Ning Shu. She then bowed to Lu Chongqing. Lu Chongqing lowered his eyes. Ning Shu said to Lu Chongqing calmly, Phoenix Empress, you should go back. Stay in Phoenix Resting Palace and don't come out. Think about it. I understand. Lu Chongqing stood up and left. The jade pendant and Xiangfei's bamboo flute made a special sound when they collided. What could Ning Shu say? Relationships were always so messy. Where did you go? Don't you know my situation? Ning Shu asked Autumn Maid. When did the Phoenix Empress come? Autumn Maid immediately knelt down and begged for forgiveness. The Phoenix Empress came not long after your Majesty fell asleep. The Phoenix Empress asked me to prepare the hot water, but something happened and I was delayed. Ning Shu rubbed his brows. Lu Chongqing had purposely sent Autumn Maid away. Ning Shu directly issued a decree that Lu Chongqing was grounded for a month to prevent him from causing trouble again. Lu Chongqing didn't say anything after being grounded by Ning Shu. He didn't expect a good outcome. It was just like in his dream. He would be banished to the cold palace and only grounded. The Phoenix Empress and the Crown Princess were both grounded, which made the atmosphere a bit strange. Ministers constantly sent up memorials to lift the Crown Princess and the Phoenix Empress confinement. Ning Shu simply threw these memorials to the side and ignored them. She could do whatever she wanted. These things could not threaten her. Chapter 554. After Ning Shu grounded the Phoenix Empress in Phoenix Perch Palace, she never went to see him again. Seeing him made things even more awkward. In the end, Lu Zhongqing took out the antidote because he still had Mu Nishang in his heart. His heart was probably in a tangle of love and hate. He could have not taken out the antidote, but in the end, he still took it out. It was one thing if he took out the antidote. He could have given it to her without anyone knowing. But he confessed everything. It was like a broken pot smashing a broken pot. Lu Zhongqing obediently stayed in Phoenix Perch Palace. He did not make a fuss. He was very calm. No matter how one looked at it, it was like his heart was dead. Ning Shu dragged his zombie-like stiff body to court. The officials once again reported that the grounded Crown Princess was released. Ning Shu glanced at Mu Qing, who was trying her best to hide her presence. He lightly said, speaking of which, I haven't seen the Crown Princess in a long time. Ever since Mu Qing's identity as the fifth daughter of the Emperor was announced, she had the qualifications to attend the imperial court. Now that she saw Ning Shu's gaze on her, Mu Qing's back straightened and the hair on her back stood up. Mu Qing knew that this old witch was always ready to push her into the pit. After living in the cold palace for so many years, Mu Qing believed in keeping a low profile and protecting herself. She didn't even say a word when she was in the imperial court. You all come with me to see the Crown Princess. Ning Shu stood up and endured the pain. He dragged his body that was about to fall apart and slowly walked down the steps. The officials saw that Ning Shu wanted to go to the Crown Princess residence to see the grounded Crown Princess. They were a bit surprised, but they still followed. Ning Shu sat on the palanquin and said to Mu Qing, who was walking behind her, "Old 5, come to Jin's side." Mu Qing glanced at Ning Shu and found that she was looking at her with a doting expression. Her eyes were gentle and tolerant. Mu Qing almost vomited blood. Hearing the cold snorts from the second and third princess, Mu Qing could only curse the old witch in her heart. Mu Qing slowly walked to the side of the carriage. Ning Shu said to Mu Qing, "Old 5, you haven't seen your big sister, right?" "No," Mu Qing whispered. "Mother Empress will take you to see eldest imperial sister." Ning Shu comforted Mu Qing. "Your eldest imperial sister is a kind person." Mu Qing, thought she didn't want to go at all. This old witch was sending her to the tip of the blade. Don't think that she didn't know how the fourth princess died. Didn't she die at the hands of the crown princess? A kind person. Ha! Mu Qing squeezed out 2 dry laughs from her throat. With Ning Shu in the lead, the large group arrived in front of the crown princess's residence. Official Autumn went up and knocked on the door. Soon, Mu Shui came out to greet Ning Shu. Mu Shui was dressed in black, and her hair was tied into a ponytail. She knelt on the ground with her head lowered, and it was hard to tell if she was a man or a woman. "Your son respectfully welcomes Mother Empress." Ning Shu bowed. Ning Shu made a sound of acknowledgement. He sized up the crown princess's residence. Her soul had changed, and so had her living habits. Some of the flowers and potted plants had become Luohan pines, and the beaded curtains in the pavilion had been taken down. The style had become much more robust. "We have come to see you." Ning Shu held Official Autumn's hand and walked into the main hall. He sat down and asked, "How has your reflection been in the residence recently?" Mu Shui's face was filled with sincere remorse. Her eyes were filled with admiration for Ning Shu. She said, "Your son knows his mistake." Ning Shu ignored Mu Shui's admiring gaze. He pushed Mu Qing, who was beside him. Mu Qing was suddenly pushed out, and she stumbled and almost fell to the ground. "Crown Princess, this is the 5th princess, Mu Qing. She used to live in the cold palace. We saw that she was living a sinful life, so we took her in." Ning Shu introduced Mu Qing to Mu Shui. Mu Qing's face twitched. She hurriedly bowed to Mu Shui. "Mu Qing greets your highness, Crown Princess." Mu Shui's gaze swept over Mu Qing's face. Her brows slightly furrowed, but they quickly relaxed. She bowed to Mu Qing and said, "Greetings, 5th Imperial younger sister." Mu Qing's face stiffened and trembled. She then retreated to Ning Shu's side. Mu Qing, who had lived in the cold palace since she was young, was very observant. She could keenly sense the malice in other people's emotions. She felt that the crown princess's gaze was filled with deep coldness, and there was also a hint of ridicule in it. Ning Shu smiled gently and said, "This child is very obedient. We quite like her." "Mu Qing, old witch, ever since that child Mu Yao left, there was no one by my side to talk to. Fortunately, I have this child by my side to talk to me." Ning Shu looked at Mu Qing with a kind gaze. "Please don't say any more." Mu Qing felt her eyelids twitching. She lowered her head and looked bashful. Mu Shui narrowed her eyes. First, it was Mu Yao. Now, there was someone like Mu Qing. Mu Shui sneered in her heart. Ning Shu stood up. "We came to see you. We thought you had reflected on your actions, so we took the opportunity to borrow your confinement order. But now, Crown Princess, you should continue to be confined. We don't think you have repented at all." Mu Shui knelt on the ground and said with a frown, "Imperial Mother, this child really knows her wrongs. This child is truly regretful about 4th Imperial younger sister's matter. This child has never thought of harming 4th Imperial younger sister." Ning Shu said coldly, "You're not being honest. We asked you why you went to Mu Yao's residence, but you didn't tell us." What made you go to 4th Imperial Younger Sister's residence? We want to hear the reason. Mu Xue's eyes flashed, making her eyes seem even darker. She hesitated for a moment before saying, this child heard that 4th Imperial Younger Sister's residence has dragon robes. Impudent. Ning Shu grabbed the teacup on the table and smashed it at Mu Xue's head. Mu Xue swayed slightly and dodged the teacup. The teacup fell to the ground and shattered into pieces. The tea spilled on the ground and steamed. Ning Shu thought, fuck, you dare to dodge. Imperial Mother, this child also heard about it, so I wanted to go to 4th Imperial Younger Sister's residence to confirm it. When Mu Xue said this, her heart was full of regret. She shouldn't have gone to 4th Imperial Younger Sister's residence. At that time, she was certain that there was a dragon robe in 4th Imperial Younger Sister's residence. It was because she thought, your beloved daughter secretly hid a dragon robe in her residence. She looks pure and innocent, but she's also a scheming person. Mu Xue went to 4th Imperial Younger Sister's residence, but she didn't expect such a thing to happen. Then did you find the dragon robe? Ning Shu looked coldly at Mu Xue. Mu Xue pursed her lips and shook her head. At that time, this child didn't look for the dragon robe. Why didn't you tell me about this matter? Why did you deal with it in private? Crown Princess, as the heir to the throne, there are many people watching your every move. For a groundless matter, you went against the imperial edict and did such an impulsive thing. I think you need to be grounded and reflect on yourself. Your Majesty, please calm down. The ministers in the courtyard all knelt down and begged for mercy for Mu Xue. Your Majesty, Crown Princess only did this because she wanted to know the truth. Chapter 555. Ning Shu was very impatient with these officials. They were paid a salary, yet they still wanted to use numbers to control her, the Empress. They all wanted to leave their names in history. Why didn't they just go bang their heads against the wall? Kneeling down scared her to death. The Crown Princess's prestige in the court is quite high. So many people are pleading for you. Ning Shu's lips twitched. Good ability, forming a clique for personal gain. Ning Shu pointed at the officials. You, and you. Are you saying that I, the Empress, can be disobeyed at will? That you can disobey my orders on impulse? That you can disobey my orders when you have no other choice? One after another, the focus was blurred. We don't dare. The officials knelt on the ground and kowtowed, not daring to say anything else. Mu Xue frowned and glanced at Ning Shu. She was a bit puzzled as to why he had come here today. Mother Empress, I was wrong. I didn't think before doing things. Mu Xue kowtowed again. I will reflect on my actions. Ning Shu sneered and said coldly, the Crown Princess really loves her officials. I only scolded these officials a bit, and the Crown Princess immediately took all the blame. She even tried to kill her own sister. Mu Xue clenched her fists. Her face was gloomy. She quickly glanced at Ning Shu and saw the disgust and ridicule on her face. Mu Xue's heart was full of doubts. Why wasn't this woman dead yet? It shouldn't be. I was wrong. Mu Xue didn't know what else to say. No matter what she said, the other party would find fault with it. Ning Shu had spoken so much that her body couldn't take it anymore. She could only sit down and tremble. Mu Qing looked at Ning Shu with a complicated expression. This old witch was usually half dead, but now she was so energetic. She was probably just holding on. Ning Shu's throat was bleeding. He glanced at official Autumn, and she immediately brought a cup of tea to Ning Shu. Ning Shu gulped down the tea and swallowed the blood in his throat. After drinking a cup of tea, Ning Shu coldly snorted. If there's a next time, I will depose you of the Crown Prince. If you don't reflect on yourself and restrain yourself, I will depose you even if it means risking the country's foundation. Lao Wu, let's go, Ning Shu said to Mu Qing, who was standing there like a pillar. Mu Qing instantly felt the crown princess's gloomy gaze sweep across her face. What was this old witch trying to do? Was he deliberately trying to pit her against the crown princess? Mu Qing felt that she did not have the power to go against the crown princess. Although she had the power given to her by the old witch, she did not have the same prestige as the crown princess. From what happened just now, it could be seen that if anything happened to the crown princess, most of the ministers would kneel down and plead for her. Mu Qing silently estimated her chances of winning against the crown princess. Now, the old witch was purposely drawing hatred for her. Mu Qing felt that the old witch wanted to kill her. If she could become the empress, that would be good. Otherwise, she would become someone else's whetstone. The old witch was so vicious, purposely wanting them to kill each other. What are you standing there for? Let's go. Although Ning Shu was urging Mu Qing, his tone was full of love and tolerance. When Mu Qing heard this, her legs became weak. The old witch was not like this when they were in private. There was no need to mention how cold she was. Now, she was acting like a loving mother with sinister intentions. Mu Xue was kneeling on the ground. When she saw Ning Shu's attitude towards the crown princess, she frowned. She could not understand why Mu Nishang did not like Mu Xue. They were both children, so why was there such a big gap? Mu Qing quickly walked to Ning Shu's side and stood behind Ning Shu to reduce her presence. Ning Shu looked at her and rolled his eyes. Even if he did not want to, he had to. Mu Qing felt Ning Shu's evil eyes again. She wanted to vomit blood. This old witch had a grudge against her, and it was revenge for being rude to her. Ning Shu walked to the door and seemed to remember something. He said to Mu Qing, "You go out first. I have something to say to the crown princess." Mu Qing immediately went out and closed the door. Only Ning Shu and Mu Xue were left in the room. Ning Shu sighed and said to the kneeling Mu Xue, "Get up." "Thank you, mother." Mu Xue stood up. "Mother, what do you have to say to me?" "Actually, it's nothing." Ning Shu took Mu Xue's hand. She lowered her head and looked at Mu Xue's fair and smooth hand. Then, she looked at her own paws. Ning Shu's heart felt unbalanced. Mu Xue looked at Ning Shu in confusion. She did not understand what was wrong with this person. She wanted to pull her hand away, but he held it tightly. Ning Shu calculated in her heart that she was no match for Mu Xue, who was strong and healthy. Ning Shu took a deep breath, then took out a dagger and stabbed it into his heart. A mouthful of black blood sprayed on Mu Xue's face. He opened his mouth and screamed. Mu Xue immediately understood Ning Shu's intention. She tried to break free from Ning Shu's hand, but he held on tightly. Ning Shu used the last of his strength to not let go of Mu Xue's hand. "You!" Mu Xue sucked in a cold breath. She kicked Ning Shu. Ning Shu spat out black blood. He held on tightly to Mu Xue's hand. His nose was blocked by the black blood. He could not breathe. "Even if I die, I won't let go of you. I won't be able to complete my mission. You can forget about it." The people outside heard the screams in the room. Mu Qing was the first to open the door. What she saw was the crown princess committing a crime. Everyone was shocked. Mu Qing shouted, "Crown princess, you dare to commit a crime against the imperial mother? Imperial physician, quickly call an imperial physician." Mu Xue's face was stained with black blood. Her hand seemed to be bound by a giant iron chain. She could not pry open Ning Shu's hand. "You're so evil." Ning Shu spat out black blood. He said with difficulty, "Depose the crown princess." Mu Xue was shocked. She looked at Ning Shu in a daze. Even if he died, he wanted to drag her down with him. Ding! You have left the mission world. The voice of 2333 sounded. Ning Shu's soul was instantly ejected from Mu Nishang's body. At this moment, he could no longer feel pain. Killing the emperor and mother. Everyone looked at Mu Xue's bloody face. There was only one thought in their mind. The crown princess was about to die. Mu Xue's face flashed with gloom. She tried to pry open the hand holding her, but no matter how hard she tried, she could not. Her fingernails dug into her flesh. Mu Xue was shocked by this. Mu Qin took out the Imperial Guard's seal and had the Imperial Guards capture Mu Xue. Mu Xue looked at the seal in Mu Qin's hand and said coldly, "How dare you? I am the crown princess. Who dares to touch me? Mu Xue, you killed your sister and mother. This is a heinous crime." Before the imperial mother died, she said she wanted to depose the crown princess. Mu Qin waved at the imperial guards. The imperial guards rushed into the room and surrounded Mu Xue. Chapter 556. Mu Xue dragged the corpse and was surrounded by so many people. It was difficult for her to escape. In the end, she was detained by the imperial guards. However, Mu Nishang's hand was still tightly holding on to Mu Xue's lifeless body. She tried for a long time but couldn't pull her away. The ancient people believed in ghosts and gods. They said that the Empress's soul was entangled in Mu Xue's body. That was why she was holding on to the crown princess so tightly. In the end, it took a lot of effort to pull the two apart. Mu Nishang's hand was fixed in place. She couldn't close her fingers or stretch them out. Her death looked very miserable. There were a few bruises on Mu Xue's wrist. They were all caused by someone. How much hatred did someone have to have for her to be like this? Mu Xue was thrown into prison. Mu Qin took out the imperial edict. After burying the empress, she ascended the throne as quickly as possible. However, Mu Qin's ascension to the throne didn't go smoothly. First of all, the court officials were not convinced by Mu Xue. Especially since Mu Qin was a child in the Cold Palace. Her father was a concubine who was demoted to the Cold Palace. Her status was low. Mu Qin followed the list that Ning Shu gave her. First, she made a court official as an example to others. Just in case, Mu Qin wanted to kill Mu Xue in the prison. Mu Qin didn't dare to be careless against someone who could make the old witch risk her life. Mu Qin guessed that the old witch knew that she wouldn't live for long, so she decided to frame her death on Mu Xue. Therefore, Mu Xue had to die. What's more, there were rumors that she wasn't the daughter of the previous empress. This kind of rumor was very unfavorable for her. Moreover, this rumor was true. It said that she was the child of her father and a female official. She didn't have the empress's bloodline. Therefore, Mu Xue was qualified to inherit the throne. Mu Qin knew that she had already reached this point. There was no turning back. It was all because of the old witch. The old witch was probably very proud now. This was the result she wanted. In order to stabilize her position and not let the civil and military officials think about Mu Xue, the crown prince, Mu Qin publicly tried Mu Xue and made a big deal out of the fact that she killed her sister and mother. She wanted the civil and military officials to see how such a person could be the emperor. How could such an inhumane person be fit to be the empress? Mu Xue only looked at Mu Qin coldly and sneered, "You're just a lowly person who took over a magpie's nest. I don't deserve to be the empress, but do you? You're just the child of a lowly female official. How dare you compare yourself to me?" Mu Qin also had doubts in her heart. She suspected that she wasn't the old witch's child, but she didn't show any expression on her face. She said faintly, "I am the late empress' child. How can the country's affairs be trifled with? Mother Empress wouldn't make such a rash decision. Imperial Mother will pass down the throne to Zhen, Zhen will be a child of the Mu family. Instead, it was you who did such a crazy thing because you were afraid that Imperial Mother would cripple you. In the end, Mu Shui was beheaded. It wasn't that Mu Shui didn't want to fight, but she didn't have as many resources as Mu Qing. Mu Nikhang gave the commander's seal to Mu Qing. Political power came from the barrel of a gun. She had to have power. Other than the position of crown prince, she didn't have any other advantages. The winner was the king, and the loser was the bandit. Even if Mu Qing didn't have Mu Nishang's bloodline, she was still the one sitting on the throne. After Mu Shui died, Mu Qing had a grand funeral. It was as grand as an emperor's funeral. After Mu Shui's death, Lu Chongqing of Phoenix Palace committed suicide. Mu Qing had no choice but to hold another grand funeral. She held 3 funerals in 1 month. Zhang Jiasen returned to the system. The system said in a cold, mechanical voice, the mission this time failed. Zhang Jiasen rubbed his forehead and said faintly, I'm not used to a woman's body. I suspect Mu Nichang's identity. It's a mission enforcer, the system said coldly. Zhang Jiasen pursed his lips and asked, can you find out who it is? The support systems are independent of each other. I can't find out the information of other mission enforcers. The system's voice was cold and mechanical. Zhang Jiasen felt that this mission enforcer was familiar. Her every move was familiar. If he wasn't wrong, it should be meow meow meow. That mission enforcer committed suicide. Did her mission fail? Zhang Jiasen asked the system. I'm not sure, the system replied. Zhang Jiasen sighed. The reason he was able to keep his life this time was because he had obtained a treasure before. However, this treasure had now disappeared into thin air, blocking the power of being obliterated. Zhang Jiasen's mind was filled with the scene of Mu Nikhang committing suicide. The veins on the hand that was grabbing him were bulging. It was terrifying. Looking at the hand that was no longer human, it was too crazy. Someone who should have died long ago was cursed for such a long time. She was able to endure the pain of the curse. Zhang Jiasen suddenly laughed. He had fallen for the same person twice. Zhang Jiasen felt that he would meet this person again in the future. The hatred between the 2 times could not be resolved so easily. One must know that enemies often cross paths. Zhang Jiasen muttered Meow Meow Meow's name. His voice was very strange. After Ning Shu returned to the system space, he fell into a deep sleep. He had never been so tired in a world. Even though he had left Mu Nichang's body, he still felt pain. The pain was so painful that Ning Shu did not dare to think about it. He was quite proud of himself for being able to endure it. After sleeping for an unknown amount of time, Ning Shu woke up and stretched. He looked down and saw that his soul was much stronger than before. It was much denser. Ning Shu, was this the compensation for the pain? 2333, what's going on? I feel like my soul is much stronger than before, Ning Shu asked 2333 in surprise. 2333 said, it's like forging iron. After experiencing pain, if you can endure it, you will be reborn. If you can't, your soul will collapse. Some people are strong, some people are weak. That's how it is. Congratulations, your stubborn persistence made your soul much stronger than before, 2333 said happily, the stronger the soul, the less emotional the client will be affected. Ning Shu nodded. He had gained something. This mission was really fucked up. He even wasted 35 merit points to exchange for an amulet. His heart hurt. Ning Shu's heart hurt more than if he had been cursed. After doing so many missions, merit points were the rarest thing. After doing so many missions, he only had so little merit points. He did not expect to use it in such a situation. She wanted to commit suicide. Ning Shu said casually, let's see the points this time. You didn't have much hope for this mission. You didn't even complete the mission. You just wanted to see how many points you had and see if you could exchange them for a curse resistance aura. Ning Shu did not want to be in so much pain anymore. The pain made his heart feel cold. He did not want her to know who the mission enforcer in Mu Shue's body was, or she would kill him. Chapter 557. 2333 brought up the status panel and said, "Just treat this mission as a wasted trip." Ning Shu did not have much hope in the first place. This world was a huge loss. Ning Shu looked at the status panel. Number 23333 Name, Ning Shu, Beginner Mission Taker, Age, 27 points, 1, 550 000/100 000 Soul, 300 HP, 71 Wisdom, 170 Charm, 3 Luck, 44 Spirit, 120 Faith, 2, 920 Potential, 39 Martial Strength, 112 Merit, 15 Skills, 5th Ring Shooting Technique, Trash Fighting Technique, Beginner Martial Arts, Beginner Poison Technique, Beginner Business Management Knowledge, Beginner Code Programming, Beginner Lawyer Skills Honorable Title, Goddess of War, Selfless Ancestor Items, Calm Aura, Amulet Aura, Mother of the World. Queen's Blessing, Sister Model Worker, Chen Shi's Blessing, Leader Aura, Grass Blessing, Best Friend for Life, Miao Miao Miao's Blessing, Fulfill Mu Nichang's Wish, Choose a New Successor. Mission Completion, 60%. Obtained 100,000 points, 1 Attribute Point, 20 Faith, 5 Merit. Ning Shu looked at the 100,000 points, 1 Attribute Point, 1 Attribute Point, 1 point. Ning Shu was surprised that the mission completion was 60%. This meant that the mission was not considered a failure. The amulet was still in her inventory. This meant that the mission was not a failure. She saved an amulet. She did not care about the points. As long as she had the amulet, her life was guaranteed. The reason why Ning Shu was able to commit suicide so easily was because of the existence of the amulet that allowed her to keep her life. Ning Shu asked 2333, "Didn't I fail the mission? I guess Mu Nikhang saw how pitiful you were and let you pass the mission." Mu Nikhang herself did not want to reverse her life and chose to reincarnate. 2333 explained. Ning Shu nodded. Sure enough, he had to hold on to everything. No matter what the outcome was, if he had listened to 2333 and killed himself, then the quest would have failed. Mu Nishang is not happy that you gave the throne to Mu Qing. Mu Qing is not Mu Nishang's child at all. How can Mu Nishang not know if she gave birth to this child? 2333 said angrily. What are you thinking? Ning Shu, what the hell? Fuck, what was going on? The Phoenix Empress had told her that Mu Qing was the child of a concubine who had been banished to the cold palace, and then she had imagined Mu Qing as Mu Nishang's child. Ning Shu covered his face in a fancy way. Fortunately, in the female supreme country, it was a woman who ascended to the throne. Ning Shu was about to distribute the attribute points when he saw the 1 attribute point. 1 attribute point, damn. Ning Shu felt hopeless and added 1 attribute point to charm. Serial number, 23333 Name, Ning Shu, Beginner Mission Taker, Age, 27 points, 1. 65 million Soul Value, 300 HP, 71 Wisdom, 170 Charm, 31 Luck, 44 MP, 120 Faith, 49 Aptitude, 39 Martial Strength, 112 Merit, 6 Skills, 5th Ring Shooting Technique, Trash Fighting Technique, Beginner Martial Arts, Beginner Poison Technique, Beginner Business Management Knowledge, Beginner Code Programming, Beginner Lawyer Skills Honorable Title, Goddess of War, Selfless Ancestor Tools, Calm Aura, Amulet Aura, Mother of the World, Queen's Blessing, Model Worker, Chen Shi's Blessing, Leader Aura, Grass Blessing, Best Friend, Miao Miao Miao's Blessing. After setting up the attribute points, Ning Shu walked around in a flirtatious manner. She asked 2333, I've added charm points. Do you think I've become prettier? 2333, system notification, 2333 doesn't want to talk to you, and threw a pile of poop at you. Ning Shu pursed his lips and opened the system shop. He wanted to see if there was anything that could resist curses. That way, he wouldn't be so passive in the future. After browsing for a while, Ning Shu found the curse that Mu Shui used on him. It was quite expensive, costing 500,000 points. Using 500,000 points to buy a one-time use item, he was definitely rich. Ning Shu looked around and saw the faith aura, which could resist curses and soul attacks from others. However, the faith aura wasn't redeemable with points, but with faith. It felt like good things weren't redeemable with points. The faith aura required 40 points of faith, and Ning Shu only had 49 in total. Ning Shu was a little hesitant. He asked 2333, "Is it worth it for 40 points of faith?" 2333 was silent for a moment. Faith is a very precious thing. It's the pure faith in a person's heart. Many intermediate mission takers don't have faith. Ning Shu frowned. Does 2333 mean it's not worth it? Why don't you go to the virtual space and see if there's anything cheaper? Ning Shu suggested. There are a lot of things in the virtual space. Ning Shu thought for a moment and closed the system shop. He stood in the virtual space channel, and after a moment of dizziness, he appeared in the virtual space. This time, Ning Shu didn't wander around blindly. He went to the store and saw the information, prices, and trading methods of the products in the virtual space. Ning Shu's finger swiped across the interface and saw the faith aura. The price was only 1 point cheaper than the system shop. The store owner saw Ning Shu staring at the faith aura and said with a smile, "Little girl, you like this aura? It can resist all curses. It's very powerful." Ning Shu smiled and said, "It's too expensive, and it uses faith. But it's very practical." The store owner saw that Ning Shu really wanted it, so he quickly said, "If you buy this faith aura, I'll give you a string of prayer beads." The store owner took out the prayer beads from a box. The prayer beads were made of a string of clear beads. Ning Shu took the prayer beads and felt a cool air invade her soul. Her heart became clear, and the negative emotions in her heart slowly disappeared. This is a good thing. Ning Shu's expression didn't change. He asked 2333 in his mind, "What are these prayer beads? They look good." "It's okay. It can remove some negative emotions." "That's all," 2333 said. Ning Shu returned the prayer beads to the store owner and shook his head. "I only have 35 faith. Can I trade the faith aura?" From the store owner's attitude, Ning Shu could see that faith was very precious. The store owner looked like he was struggling. In the end, he shook his head. Ning Shu wasn't disappointed. He planned to go to other stores. Chapter 558. Ning Shu planned to take a look at other shops. If she couldn't get it, she might return to this shop. After all, Ning Shu quite liked the rosary beads, which could calm her mind. Seeing that Ning Shu was about to leave, the shop owner gritted his teeth and said, "Okay, 35 points of faith. And a rosary beads," Ning Shu said happily. The shop owner's face trembled. Ning Shu paid 35 points of faith and had 14 points of faith left. Sure enough, things in the virtual space were cheaper. Ning Shu put on the rosary beads and immediately felt calm. The rosary beads were quite beautiful, round and full. After leaving the shop, Ning Shu went to a restaurant and ordered some food to satisfy her appetite. Ning Shu saw that the others were in groups of 3 or 5, and there were people who were sharing tables. However, she was always alone. She didn't have any friends she could talk to. It was as if the mission enforcers she met were all enemies. Forget it. Friends were not things like that. Instead of thinking about catching horses every day, it was better to plant grass now. In the future, there would be many horses coming to eat grass. When she became stronger, she would meet like-minded people. After eating a table full of dishes, Ning Shu wandered around the city for a while. She hadn't noticed before that there were casinos and arenas in the virtual space, and many mission enforcers participated in gambling. Ning Shu saw a mission enforcer lose everything and use his soul to gamble. In the end, he lost and only had his soul origin left. His soul was as thin as a bubble, which could burst with a poke. It would be difficult to enter the mission enforcer's body in such a state. Ning Shu felt that mission enforcers, even if they had become mission enforcers and had eternal life, were still humans. The bad habits of humans were also deeply buried in mission enforcers. The people in the casino saw Ning Shu stretch her neck and look around. They looked up and down at Ning Shu's soul. It was a rare tenacity. Ning Shu asked, "Little girl, do you want a few rounds?" Ning Shu quickly waved his hand. "I'm just looking around." After saying that, Ning Shu left the casino. She didn't want to touch this kind of thing. If she couldn't even resist this kind of temptation, how strong could she be? After walking around, Ning Shu returned to the system space. First, he sat cross-legged on the carpet and cultivated for a while. He only stopped when he could no longer absorb the materials in the system space. Then, Ning Shu took a book from the bookshelf. Her goal was to finish reading all the books on the bookshelf. Ning Shu couldn't feel the passage of time. He didn't know how much time had passed. He flipped through the book until he reached the last page. Then, he closed the book and placed it on the bookshelf. He watered the potted plants and ran on the treadmill. He touched here and there. He wasn't in a hurry at all. Ning Shu opened the exchange store and exchanged for basic survival items, fasting pills, water, medicine, antidote pills, fake death medicine, and some realgar powder. Ning Shu discovered that the faking death medicine was a good thing. After exchanging the basic items, Ning Shu said to 2333, "Let's start the mission." "Okay." 2333 immediately said. Ning Shu's head was dizzy for a moment. He felt that his soul had entered a body. When he got used to the body, Ning Shu opened his eyes. He raised his head from his arms and moved his stiff neck. The original owner was sitting in front of the stove to light the fire. There was a flame licking the bottom of the pot. Ning Shu saw that the flame in the stove was getting smaller. She looked around and grabbed a piece of dry wood and stuffed it into the stove. The surrounding environment was very dim. There was a kerosene lamp on the table. Ning Shu didn't know what time it was. The room was full of the smell of beans. Not far away, there was a gauze filter for bean dregs. In the pot, snow-white soy milk was boiling. The soy milk was bubbling. This was making tofu. Ning Shu felt a little numb and quickly accepted the plot. The original owner was called Zhu Sunyang. She was already a wife. The family relied on Zhu Sunyang to make tofu. Her husband, Zhu Yanqiu, went to Shanghai to study. Zhu Sunyang was a woman with a hard life. When she was 8 or 9 years old, she was sold by her parents to the local Zhu family. With the Zhu family's conditions, they didn't need to raise a child bride. It was because Zhu Yanqiu, who was only about 4 years old at the time, was sick and didn't get better. The Zhu family only had one child. If she went, it would be like digging out the Zhu family's heart. Master Zhu had a son at an old age. He only had this one son at the age of 40. At that time, he had the mentality of driving away bad luck. He also wanted to divert Zhu Yanqiu's illness and transfer the bad luck to someone else. So, he came up with the idea of raising a child bride. It was late in the Qin dynasty. The Eight-Nation Alliance had already swept through the old summer palace. The warlords were divided, the society was in turmoil, and the people lived in poverty. Zhu Sunyang's parents had no choice but to sell Zhu Sunyang to the Zhu family. The Zhu family matched Zhu Sunyang and Zhu Yanqiu's birth characters and found that it was very suitable. So, they gave Zhu Yanqiu's parents half a string of copper coins. From then on, Zhu Yanqiu was a member of the Zhu family. People in the countryside didn't have any names. Zhu Sunyang was the fourth child in the family, so she was called the fourth girl. The Zhu family wasn't satisfied with this name. Zhu Yanqiu's father, who was a scholar, gave the original owner the name Sunyang. He also gave Zhu Yanqiu the surname Zhu. In this way, even if they were a family, they could help share the bad luck for Zhu Yanqiu. A child bride didn't have any status in the family. In fact, Zhu Yanqiu's identity was like a maid who took care of Zhu Yanqiu. It was a bit like a servant girl. Zhu Sunyang, who was 8 or 9 years old, accepted her fate. At least she could eat her fill in the Zhu family. Perhaps it was because of the effect of driving away bad luck, Zhu Yanqiu's health gradually improved. From then on, Zhu Sunyang started to take care of Zhu Yanqiu every day. She bathed and fed Zhu Yanqiu. She also had to play with Zhu Yanqiu. It could be said that Zhu Sunyang was both a wife and a mother. Zhu Yanqiu inherited the good looks of the Zhu family. He wore a Westerner's little suit and small leather shoes. When he walked out, one could tell that he was a young master of a big family. In this Jiangnan water town, the turmoil in Beiping didn't have much impact here. With the abdication of the last emperor in the late Qing dynasty, the feudal society ended. The currency in circulation changed from copper coins to yuan datu and all kinds of paper notes. Zhu Yanqiu and Zhu Sunyang also grew up. When Zhu Yanqiu was 16 years old, he and Zhu Sunyang consummated their marriage. However, the unexpected happened. The Zhu family fell into dire straits. The family's business directly closed down. Old Master Zhu directly vomited blood and fell ill. He never got up from the bed again. In the end, he passed away. All the valuable things in the family were used to pay off the debts. After Old Master Zhu was buried, the servants in the family were dismissed. The family of 3 moved out of the big house and squeezed into the small house. The huge difference made Zhu Yanqiu very uncomfortable. She felt lost and helpless. In the end, she calmed down and told Mother Zhu that she was going to study in Shanghai. At this time, new and old ideas collided. The girl walked into the school. She wore a modified cheongsam, revealing her thin arms. The new students accepted the Westerner's ideas. Zhu Yanqiu wanted to revitalize the Zhu family through studying. Mother Zhu gave most of the family's money to Zhu Yanqiu and let Zhu Yanqiu go to Shanghai to study. Chapter 559. Zhu Yanqiu carried a suitcase with the money her mother gave her and boarded the ship to Shanghai. Not long after Zhu Yanqiu left, Zhu Sunyang found out that she was pregnant. However, the situation at home was difficult. Zhu Sunyang paid a small fee and learned how to make tofu from someone. She woke up early and worked late to make tofu while pregnant. Making tofu was a very arduous job. Soaking the soybeans, grinding the pulp, using that kind of big millstone to grind the pulp, filtering it, boiling the pulp, adding the brine, and pressing it into shape. These were all done by Zhu Sunyang. Zhu Sunyang basically didn't have time to rest in a day. She had to wake up in the middle of the night to make tofu. The next morning, she had to carry a pole and sell it on the street. After selling it, she would go home and grind the pulp non-stop. 9 months later, Zhu Sunyang gave birth to a son. Zhu Sunyang worked hard to manage the house and also relied on selling tofu to support Zhu Yanqiu's studies. Zhu Yanqiu would often send letters or telegrams to ask Zhu Sunyang to send him money. The reason was to buy books or pens. Zhu Yanqiu didn't suffer at all when the Zhu family was in dire straits. He used the best for everything. Even the socks he wore were the latest nylon socks made by foreigners. Foreigners' toys were luxuries at that time. Every time Zhu Yanqiu asked for money, Zhu Su would send her money. The family lived frugally and tightened their belts. Life was very hard, especially Zhu Su-Nyang. 5 days after giving birth, she got out of bed to work. What Zhu Su-Nyang didn't know was that Zhu Yanqiu had a girlfriend. She was a girl in the same school. The students in the school accepted the new ideas and advocated free love. It was easy for like-minded men and women in the school to get together. Dating and playing with friends were expensive forms of entertainment. Zhu Yanqiu could only ask his family for money frequently. Zhu Su-Nyang gritted her teeth and gave it to him. Zhu Yanqiu naturally got together with his girlfriend, Fang Feifei. After the Japanese invasion of China broke out in 918, this pair of lovers resolutely went to the battlefield and became a legend. Zhu Yanqiu became a senior military officer and Fang Feifei became a war reporter. They were called heroines. Zhu Su-Nyang died of depression. With so many years of hard work, her body couldn't take it anymore. She died before the age of 40. Until her death, Zhu Su-Nyang still couldn't figure it out. Zhu Yanqiu said that she was a civilized and enlightened person and wanted monogamy. She gave birth to a child for Zhu Yanqiu and grew up together with her. If they weren't husband and wife, then what were they? Zhu Yanqiu said that she couldn't communicate with her, but Zhu Yanqiu rarely spoke to her. Every time, she only asked for money. Zhu Su-Nyang's wish was, she would no longer be burdened by the Zhu family and live her own life with her son. Zhu Su-Nyang couldn't enter the school like Fang Feifei and couldn't wear black leather shoes and pleated skirts. It wasn't her fault that she couldn't, but Zhu Yanqiu just disliked Zhu Su-Nyang. How should he put it? Zhu Su-Nyang was the cannon fodder caused by the collision of feudal and advanced ideas. However, it was Zhu Yanqiu who was irresponsible and did his duty to Zhu Su-Nyang. After Ning Shu accepted the plot, he shook his head. That was why Zhu Su-Nyang was so kind. Even her wish was so humble. If she didn't kill Zhu Yanqiu, such an ungrateful scumbag, was she going to keep him for the new year? Ning Shu could feel Zhu Su-Nyang's resentment towards Zhu Yanqiu, but due to the environment she grew up in, she didn't dare to ask for too much. Zhu Su-Nyang was a woman in the feudal society. She was kind. She sacrificed everything for her family and used her own strength to help her family. She was even a little humble. On the other hand, Fang Feifei was a person who accepted new ideas. She was decisive and daring. She bravely pursued her ideals. When she wore a dress and walked on the street with her head held high, she had a different kind of charm and was very bright. One was wearing a gray shirt and black pants, the other was wearing a short-sleeved cheongsam and holding a poetry book in her hand. As long as one wasn't blind, one would know who to choose. Ning Shu could only laugh at this. Ning Shu rubbed his sleepy eyes, added some firewood into the stove, and scooped out the soy milk scum with a spoon. She didn't know how to make tofu at all. She relied on the memory in the mind of the original owner. It was estimated that she would make all the 365 lines once in the future. Ning Shu made tofu in a hurry. He worked until dawn, but Ning Shu still wasn't done. Su-Nyang, you're still at home. Is the tofu still not done today? Ning Shu asked when Mother Zhu walked into the kitchen. Ning Shu was working hard to make the tofu take shape. Hearing Mother Zhu's words, he said, "It'll be done soon." Usually, Zhu Su-Nyang would leave before dawn. Today, the sun was out. Mother Zhu saw Ning Shu was still in the kitchen after waking up. She walked over to take a look and helped Ning Shu. Mother Zhu would occasionally help, but Mother Zhu was the wife of a rich family. Even if she was down and out now, some habits couldn't be changed. However, Mother Zhu was a smart person. She was the mistress of a rich family. There were many servants in the house, and she was very good at managing them. She often said warm words to Zhu Su-Nyang, saying that Zhu Su-Nyang was a virtuous daughter-in-law. Being able to marry Zhu Su-Nyang was a blessing accumulated by the ancestors of the Zhu family. Zhu Xunyang didn't have a high status in the Zhu family. She didn't even have the qualifications to eat at the table. Now that Mother Zhu acknowledged her, Zhu Xunyang was very happy. Zhu Xunyang was a kind person. Besides, she was already a member of the Zhu family. There was no place for her to go. Xunyang, has Yanxiu written recently? Mother Zhu asked Ning Shu. Ning Shu casually said, not yet. Probably soon. Zhu Yanxiu, who was in love, was always in need of money. After much difficulty, the tofu was finally done. Ning Shu placed the tofu on the pole and carried the pole on her shoulders. Ning Shu tried to lift the pole, but she still couldn't lift it. She could only gather her qi and her dantian and try again. This time, he lifted it. However, Ning Shu staggered forward 2 steps before stabilizing himself. The shoulder pole was very painful. Since Zhu Yanxiu left this family to study in Shanghai, Zhu Xunyang had been doing this every day. However, Zhu Yanxiu didn't take any responsibility for Zhu Xunyang. Instead, he squeezed Zhu Xunyang dry. The new ideology that Zhu Yanxiu accepted was freedom, equality, and universal love. Everyone had the right to pursue happiness. However, deep in his heart, he looked down on Zhu Xunyang. He looked down on Zhu Xunyang for being illiterate and rustic. Mother, Siyuan is awake. Take care of him. Ning Shu turned his head and said to Mother Zhu. Zhu Siyuan was Zhu Yanxiu and Zhu Xunyang's son. He was almost 3 years old. Mother Zhu nodded and told Ning Shu to be careful. Ning Shu carried the pole and left. He followed Zhu Xunyang's route. There would be some acquaintances who would buy her tofu. Selling tofu wasn't difficult. It was just that the courage made Ning Shu feel very bitter. The tofu was almost all water. It was simply tiring to carry 2 baskets of water everywhere. He didn't know how Zhu Yanxiu persevered. Moreover, if she persevered for a day, she could only earn some money. All kinds of banknotes could add up to 1/5 of a large amount. At this time, 5 large amounts could buy a cow. 2 large amounts could let a family of 3 live for a year. Although it was hard, Zhu Yanxiu could only persevere day after day and live a prosperous life if she could earn some money. Damn, Ning Shu really wanted to quit. However, when he thought of Zhu Xunyang's son, he could only continue to sell tofu. Chapter 560. Ning Shu didn't eat anything when he went out in the morning. He bought a sesame seed cake from a stall and ate it. After that, he carried a pole and continued to sell tofu. Ning Shu wasn't very confident about the tofu he made today. There was still some tofu left. Ning Shu thought about it and took it back to dry it and made it into dried tofu for Zhu Siyuan to eat. It was good for grinding teeth. Ning Shu first went to the post office to see if there was a letter or a telegram from Zhu Yanxiu. The people in the post office all knew Zhu Yanxiu. When they saw Ning Shu, they said directly, "Sun Yang, there is a telegram for you today." Ning Shu, she wanted money again. Zhu Yanxiu was a debt collector. Damn it. Ning Shu took the telegram and paid for it. Then he read the content of the telegram. Zhu Yanxiu said that the weather was cold and wet in Shanghai. She wanted to buy a coat. She wanted money. After leaving the post office, Ning Shu directly tore the telegram sent by Zhu Yanxiu into pieces. You deserve to freeze to death. You used my hard-earned money to please other women and acted like a young master in front of others. Get lost. Ning Shu took the money from selling tofu today and went to a restaurant to buy a roast duck. Then he went to a meat stall and bought 2 pounds of meat and 1 pound of big bones. His family hadn't eaten meat for half a month. Zhu Yanxiu went in and out of high-end Western restaurants to eat candlelight Western food. Ning Shu went home with a pole and saw Zhu Siyuan, who was 2 or 3 years old, playing in the yard. Zhu Yanqiu's mother sat under the eaves of the corridor, watching the child and sewing the soles of shoes. Seeing Ning Shu come back, Zhu Xiyuan and Ning Shu ran over. Ning Shu put down the pole and hugged Zhu Xiyuan. This was Zhu Su Nyang's precious egg. Zhu Xiyuan was a little thin and his hair was a little yellow. He looked a little malnourished. Zhu Su Nyang cooked an egg for the child occasionally or made some soy milk for him to drink when she made tofu. It could be said that the whole family was supporting Zhu Yanqiu and was sucked dry by Zhu Yanqiu. Mother Zhu put down the shoe soles in her hands and came over to see that the tofu hadn't been sold out. She had also bought meat and roast duck wrapped in oil paper. She frowned and said, "Why hasn't the tofu been sold out?" Ning Shu said, "I want to make some dried tofu for Xiyuan." "Why are you wasting so much money on so many things?" Mama Zhu asked. "Yanqiu's school fees are so expensive." "Mother, I know what to do." Ning Shu carried the load to the kitchen. Mother Zhu didn't say anything and personally cooked a meal. 2 jin of meat and dried vegetables were roasted together. The oily food looked very tempting. Ning Shu swallowed a mouthful of saliva. He really wanted to eat. Mother Zhu even cut the roast duck into slices and wrapped them in pancakes to eat. She was, after all, the madam of a wealthy family and knew how to eat. Ning Shu fed Zhu Xiyuan bone broth and made some red braised pork for the child. Ning Shu's mouth was covered in oil, and even Mother Zhu didn't care about her image as she ate. The food was incomparably delicious. The 2 adults and the child finished all the dishes on the table. They hadn't eaten meat for a long time and were very hungry. After the meal, Mother Zhu didn't move from her chair. Ning Shu began to clean up the dishes. Mother Zhu asked Ning Shu, "Did Yanqiu send a letter?" Ning Shu washed the dishes and said indifferently, "No, but I think it will be soon." Mother Zhu said, "The weather is cold. I made 2 pairs of shoes for Yanqiu. You can send them to the post office." Ning Shu glanced at the cotton shoes Mother Zhu made. They were quite exquisite, and the thread was well kept. Ning Shu felt that even if he sent them, Zhu Yanqiu wouldn't wear them. Ning Shu agreed and looked at the clothes little Xiyuan was wearing. They were very shabby. Ning Shu thought about buying some cotton and cloth to make clothes for the child. Otherwise, he would freeze to death in winter. Ning Shu wouldn't be like Zhu Sunyang, who had to save money for Zhu Yanqiu and raise the child well. Speaking of which, Zhu Sunyang was also quite miserable. She gave birth to the child, raised the child, and raised the man. The whole family depended on her. Fuck, then what was the use of Zhu Yanqiu? Later, Zhu Yanqiu became rich, but Zhu Sunyang didn't benefit at all. Instead, she was abandoned. They were like-minded comrades. Mother Zhu kept asking when Zhu Yanqiu would send a letter. In fact, Mother Zhu could go to the post office and ask, but Mother Zhu rarely went out of the yard. Mother Zhu and Zhu Yanqiu were the same. They were afraid of the outside world, and Zhu Yanqiu supported her beliefs with her clothes. Mother Zhu let Zhu Sunyang do all the work when she went out. Ning Shu pressed the tofu under a wooden plank. There was a heavy object on the plank to press the water out of the tofu. After doing all this, Ning Shu walked into Zhu Sunyang's room and took out a box from the simple cabinet. There were banknotes and money in the box. There were more than 20 yuan in total. This was all saved by Zhu Sunyang through hard work selling tofu and living frugally. 20 yuan was already a huge sum of money. With this money, the family could live well. It had only been half a month since Zhu Sunyang sent money. Now, Zhu Yanqiu asked for money more and more frequently. She probably had some progress with Fang Feifei. It was more expensive for an artistic youth to be in a relationship. What they enjoyed was on a spiritual level. Ning Shu put away the money. Selling tofu today exhausted her. If she gave this money to Zhu Yanqiu, Ning Shu felt so distressed that she couldn't breathe. Now, she had to save money quickly so that she and her son could live a better life. Whatever she wanted to do, she had to eat her fill first. At this time, it was time for Ning Shu to grind the beans again. Pushing the big millstone made her dog tired. She didn't have time to rest at all. Ning Shu was so sleepy that she dozed off while pushing the millstone. This body was a little weak. Before the age of 40, she had fallen ill from overwork. When she was free, she still had to cultivate peerless martial arts. If she had known that it was a chaotic world, she would have exchanged for a gun in advance. She had to have the ability to protect herself. Mother, Grandma. Grandma fell. She fell asleep on the ground. Zhu Xiyuan walked over and fell when he crossed the threshold. He anxiously shouted at Ning Shu who was pushing the millstone. Zhu Xiyuan still couldn't speak clearly, but Ning Shu heard him clearly. Mother Zhu fell. Ning Shu went out of the kitchen and went to the living room. He saw Mother Zhu on the ground with her eyes closed and her face pale. She didn't look well. Ning Shu wanted to put Mother Zhu on the bed, but he couldn't do it alone. He said to little Xiyuan, "Be good, Xiyuan. Mother will go find someone. You look after your grandmother and don't run around." Ning Shu hurried out and found a few middle-aged women next door. He asked them to help move Mother Zhu to the bed. The reason why he only asked for women was to avoid suspicion. Mother Zhu was a widowed woman. There was no man in the house. If a man came to the house, it would be bad for her reputation. Although there were Westerners at this time who believed that everyone was equal, feudalism was deeply ingrained. It was very harsh on women. With the help of a few aunties, the fainted Mother Zhu was put on the bed. Ning Shu asked the aunties to take care of Mother Zhu and the child. He went to the pharmacy to find a doctor. Chapter 561. Ning Shu went to the pharmacy to find a doctor and hurried back with him. Mother Zhu was still lying on the bed, and the doctor was taking her pulse. Ning Shu stood beside the bed, holding little Xiyuan's hand. If the plot didn't change, Mother Zhu wouldn't be able to survive this winter. "Doctor, how's my mother-in-law?" Ning Shu asked. The doctor took back his hand from Mother Zhu's wrist and shook his head. "It's not a serious illness. She's just depressed and worried. She needs to be nursed back to health." Ning Shu thanked the doctor and gave him the consultation fee. To put it bluntly, Mother Zhu's illness was caused by her overthinking. Mother Zhu was a woman from a big house. Ever since Grandfather Zhu died, Mother Zhu had been in a state of panic. Her son wasn't by her side, and she didn't have a man to rely on. Ning Shu shook his head. Mother Zhu was too weak. Zhu Su Nyang took good care of Mother Zhu and didn't let her do any heavy work. As a result, Mother Zhu overthought things when she was free. Ning Shu gave each of the women who came to help a piece of tofu to express his gratitude. The women accepted the tofu with smiles and told Ning Shu to call them if he needed anything. Ning Shu thanked them profusely. Ning Shu sat beside the bed and took Mother Zhu's pulse. The results were similar to what the doctor said. Ning Shu was speechless. Mother Zhu was depressed. Mother Zhu slowly woke up. Seeing Ning Shu beside the bed, she asked, "What's wrong with me?" "Mother, you're fine. You're just a bit weak. You'll be fine after more rest," Ning Shu said, avoiding the main point. "The doctor gave me a prescription. I'll be fine after taking it." Mother Zhu struggled to get up. Ning Shu helped her up. Mother Zhu said tiredly, "No need to take the medicine. Leave the money to Yanqiu." Since ancient times, illness had been the most frightening thing to people, because a family could very well be hollowed out. Zhu Sunyang didn't give up on Mother Zhu. She had a hard time every day and had to take care of her sick mother-in-law. The money for the medicine and Zhu Yanqiu's school fees all fell on Zhu Sunyang's shoulders. Zhu Sunyang could only make more tofu to sell. Often, she would be so tired that she would fall asleep on the millstone. During the period when Zhu Mu's mother was sick, Zhu Sunyang worked too hard and hurt her body. In the end, she died early. It's okay. We have money to buy medicine for you. Ning Shu said, I'll make more tofu to sell tomorrow. Mother Zhu sighed and said, I know my own body best. Send a telegram to Yanqiu and have him come back. Ning Shu agreed and went to the post office to send a telegram to Zhu Yanqiu. Even if he sent the telegram, it was useless. Zhu Yanqiu would not come back at all. The reason was that his studies were more important and he had no time. Zhu Sunyang sent telegrams to him one after another, but Zhu Yanqiu did not respond. Before Mother Zhu died, all she wanted to do was to see her son. She kept looking at the door, but Zhu Yanqiu did not come back in the end. At that time, Zhu Yanqiu, as an ambitious young man, was marching in the streets and shouting to revitalize the Chinese nation. After sending a telegram to Zhu Yanqiu, Ning Shu took the prescription to the pharmacy to get medicine for Mother Zhu. In the plot, under such difficult conditions, Zhu Sunyang did not give up on Mother Zhu. Mother Zhu had a very good reputation in this town and was known as a virtuous daughter-in-law. However, Zhu Yanqiu still abandoned Zhu Sunyang. Ning Shu did not intend to ruin this reputation. After all, in this era, reputation was very important to women. Even if he went against Zhu Yanqiu in the future, he would be justified. Besides, he would not send money to Zhu Yanqiu anymore. The nearly 20 yuan at home and the money from selling tofu every day was enough for them to live well. After getting the medicine, Ning Shu went back to decoct the medicine for Mother Zhu. When she saw Ning Shu, the first thing Mother Zhu did was to ask Ning Shu if he had sent a telegram to Zhu Yanqiu. Ning Shu said he had. Mother Zhu only missed her son. In the past few years, Zhu Sunyang had been taking care of her, but Zhu Sunyang had not entered her heart. She would not lose anything if she said some nice things. Before she died, she grabbed Zhu Sunyang's hand and said that she was a good daughter-in-law of the Zhu family. She hoped that the two of them would live well in the future. She would be relieved if she knew. Mother Zhu was afraid that Zhu Sunyang would not take care of Zhu Yanqiu after she died and would play tricks on Zhu Sunyang before she died. Zhu Sunyang was very touched. Mother Zhu's slight approval could make her die. After Mother Zhu died, Zhu Sunyang continued to sell tofu to take care of Zhu Yanqiu. Ning Shu decocted the medicine for Mother Zhu. Seeing little Ning Shu looking at him, Ning Shu took out some dried tofu for Zhu Siyuan. Zhu Siyuan took the dried tofu and ate happily. Ning Shu felt that he had to improve the food at home in the future. He had to eat well and wear warm clothes to live a good life. Speaking of which, Zhu Yanqiu had not seen her son until now. Zhu Yanqiu refreshed Ning Shu's outlook on life. His wife did not come back when she gave birth, and his mother did not come back when she died. He came back when he was successful and famous. He kowtowed a few times at his mother's grave and shed a few drops of cat urine. Was that his filial piety? Ning Shu gave the medicine to Mother Zhu and said, "Mother, drink the medicine while it's hot." The black medicine was very bitter. Mother Zhu held her breath and drank it. It was so bitter that she smacked her lips. She said with some nostalgia, "When I was in the big house, I could eat candied fruit every day." Alas, Ning Shu glanced at Mother Zhu. Candied fruit was more expensive than meat. It was a snack for rich families. With the Zhu family's current situation, they could not afford to eat candied fruit. "Mother, why don't I go buy some candied fruit for you?" Ning Shu said. Mother Zhu looked a little moved. Finally, she said, "Forget it. We don't have much money at home. We still have to send money to Yanqiu and buy medicine. I won't die if I don't eat candied fruit. Ning Shu made an "oh" sound and did not say anything. The next day, after Ning Shu sold the tofu, he went to the dessert shop and bought some candied fruit. He also bought dried walnuts for Zhu Xiyuan to nourish his brain. Now, Ning Shu wanted to raise Zhu Xiyuan until he was white and chubby. He could not suffer for Zhu Yanqiu. Even if Zhu Yanqiu could not see his suffering, she would not care. When he was buying, Ning Shu told the shop owner that his mother-in-law was afraid of bitter medicine and that he would buy some candied fruit for her. Anyway, she was a virtuous daughter-in-law who worked hard without complaint. She might as well be more filial. She also wanted to try candied fruit. After Mother Zhu drank the medicine, Ning Shu gave her the candied fruit. When Mother Zhu saw the candied fruit, her eyes flashed with surprise. She said, "Why did you buy such an expensive thing? It's too wasteful." "Mother, I know what I'm doing. Today's tofu sold for a bit more money than yesterday," Ning Shu said lightly. Mother Zhu put the candied fruit in her mouth and closed her eyes. Her expression was one of reminiscence and enjoyment. Then, she put away the rest of the candied fruit. She did not think about giving Ning Shu too. Ning Shu secretly curled his lips. Fortunately, she had left some for the child. Mother Zhu was also a selfish person. Because Mother Zhu was sick, Zhu Xiyuan slept with Ning Shu. After coaxing Zhu Xiyuan to sleep, Ning Shu sat cross-legged on the bed and cultivated his peerless martial arts. In troubled times, he had to have the ability to protect himself and his child. Chapter 562. After practicing the peerless martial arts for a while, Ning Shu stopped. His body was covered in sweat. Ning Shu fetched some water and wiped his body, then began to make tofu. At this time, it was at most 3 in the morning. Ning Shu had to grind until 10 in the morning, and he had to get up at 3 in the morning to make tofu. When the sun rose, he had to carry the steaming tofu to sell. This meant that Zhu Xiyuan couldn't even get 6 hours of sleep a day. Ning Shu made some dried tofu to sell. He sprinkled a few peppercorns and squeezed the water out of the tofu. The dried tofu was not bad and had a firm texture. It would sell well with tofu, and the price was slightly higher than that of the tofu. Ning Shu was about to go out with the load when Zhu Su's mother struggled to get up from the bed. She leaned against the door and said to Ning Shu, "Su and Yang, send a telegram to Yanqiu. I want to see him." Ning Shu saw that Zhu Su's mother's face was pale and she looked very weak. He nodded and said, "Mother, I know." After Ning Shu went out, he locked the door from the outside. There were children and patients in the house. What if a bad person got in? Maybe it was because he had practiced the peerless martial arts that his physical fitness had improved a little. He walked very quickly with the load today and felt a little more relaxed. After selling the tofu, Ning Shu went to the post office. Ning Shu, who was at the counter, said, "There's a telegram for you." Ning Shu took it and glanced at it. It was Zhu Yanqiu's reply. The content was that she was busy with her studies and couldn't take time out to go home. At the end of the letter, she asked Ning Shu to send some money and her tone wasn't good. Zhu Yanqiu was probably unhappy that he didn't send the telegram last time. Ning Shu grinned and sent a telegram to Zhu Yanqiu. The content was that her mother was very sick and wanted to see her. "Come back quickly." Ning Shu paid for the telegram. In this era, telegrams were very expensive. They were all calculated by the number of words. How much was a word? After a while, Ning Shu did not have much money left from selling tofu. He would only send telegrams when there was something important. Normally, he would write letters. After leaving the post office, Ning Shu went to a butcher's stall to buy some meat. Now that he had to improve his diet, he had to eat meat at least once a day. Moreover, Ning Shu was always hungry when he was cultivating his peerless martial arts. Originally, Ning Shu wanted to eat the fasting pill. However, when he thought about how the environment would only get worse and worse, and how food would become more and more scarce, he decided to use the fasting pill as a last resort. Back home, Ning Shu gave the telegram to Mother Zhu, who was lying in bed, and said, "Mother, Yanxiu said that she is busy with her studies and may not come back this year." Mother Zhu looked at the contents of the telegram and didn't say anything. Her face was pale and she looked very disappointed. Ning Shu said, "I sent him another telegram." Mother Zhu said, "Yanxiu wants money. Did you send him the money?" "I did." Ning Shu spouted nonsense. Zhu Yanxiu wouldn't be able to get anything from her in the future. Mother Zhu turned over on the bed with her back facing Ning Shu. Her breathing was a little rough. She was probably crying secretly. Ning Shu didn't say anything. He turned around and left Mother Zhu's room. When he returned to his room, he saw Zhu Xiyuan sitting on the bed, eating candied fruits and dried tofu. When he saw Ning Shu, he climbed down from the bed and called out to Ning Shu in a childish voice. He was a 3-year-old child, but he had never seen his father. After Zhu Xunyang died, Zhu Xiyuan was taken over by Zhu Yanxiu. After all, he was her child. The teenager was in his rebellious period. He hated his father, Zhu Yanxiu, and the heroine, Fang Feifei. He would do anything that made Zhu Yanxiu unhappy. He was a hopeless child. No matter how much Zhu Yanxiu beat him, it was useless. At that time, Zhu Yanxiu was already famous. He was a high-ranking military officer and had tens of thousands of men under his command. He could be the king of a place. Zhu Xiyuan's evil and destructive power was a little too great. He caused trouble everywhere with Zhu Yanxiu's power. Zhu Xiyuan hated his father to the bone. His mother was devoted to him, but in return, Zhu Yanxiu abandoned her mercilessly. The father and son were enemies. They felt that they couldn't live under the same sky. They fought whenever they saw each other. There were several times when Zhu Yanxiu wanted to take out his gun and shoot him, but he couldn't do it in the end. A man who abandoned his wife and son succeeded in the end and was respected by others. Ning Shu touched Zhu Xiyuan's head. Now that they were living together, he didn't care if Zhu Yanxiu died. He would let Zhu Xiyuan become a good young man with dreams and ambitions. In the end, he would climb above his father and make his father bow to him. If he hated someone, he would have to climb higher than him and control his fate. Then, as Zhu Xiyuan's mother, he would have to set an example for Zhu Xiyuan. Wasn't Fang Feifei called a heroine? Ning Shu's days were very busy. He didn't sleep at night and used meditation to replace sleep. In the early morning, he had to wake up to make tofu. Ning Shu wanted to earn more money now and buy more food. When there was a shortage of food, even a small yellow croaker wouldn't be able to buy a steamed bun. He had to fulfill Zhu Xunyang's wish and take good care of Zhu Xiyuan. He also had to plan a happy life for Zhu Xunyang. Zhu Xunyang had fallen to this point. Wasn't it because Zhu Xunyang wasn't as capable as Fang Feifei? The weather was getting colder. Ning Shu used money to buy cotton and cloth to make 2 winter jackets for little Xiyuan and himself. The reason why he didn't make clothes for Zhu Xunyang's mother was that she was bedridden. Her condition was so serious that she couldn't get out of bed. No matter how much medicine she took, it didn't work. Although it didn't work, Ning Shu still took medicine and boiled it for Zhu Xunyang's mother. He even bought candied fruit several times. Ning Shu felt that this was because of Zhu Xunyang's mother's mentality. She couldn't bear hardships. If she could endure it, she would definitely become a blessed old lady. After all, Zhu Yanxiu would become rich in the future. Sometimes, Zhu Xunyang's mother was so sick that she was muddle-headed. She would call out Zhu Yanxiu's name. It seemed that she wouldn't be able to endure it for long. When the doctor came to see her, he told Ning Shu to prepare for her funeral. Ning Shu frequently went to the post office to send telegrams to Zhu Yanqiu, asking him to come back. Zhu Yanqiu would reply before, but later on, he was probably annoyed by Ning Shu. In addition, he didn't send him money for a long time. Zhu Yanqiu was angry and didn't reply at all. Ning Shu directly said that his mother was dying and that he had to come back to send a coffin. This time, Zhu Yanqiu replied. He was very dissatisfied with Ning Shu saying that his mother was dying. Zhu Yanqiu didn't believe that his mother was dying. Zhu Yanqiu's mother was the madam of a rich family and had always been in good health. Besides, Zhu Yanqiu also knew that Zhu Su and Yang was in charge of everything at home. In the end, Zhu Yanqiu said at the end of the letter, "Thank you for everything at home." Then, he said that the winter in Shanghai was very cold. The sea breeze from the Huangpu River was humid and cold. Anyway, he needed money to buy clothes. Ning Shu tore the telegram. Anyway, Zhu Yanqiu wouldn't come back no matter how much he said. Coming out of the post office, Ning Shu began to prepare the coffin and shroud. Zhu Sunyang's mother couldn't even eat now. She could only eat a little liquid food. Sometimes, she couldn't even drink water. When Zhu Sunyang's mother was sober, she asked Ning Shu if Zhu Yanqiu had come back. As soon as Ning Shu said no, Zhu Sunyang's mother began to cry. Chapter 563. When Ning Shu saw that Mother Zhu's forehead was filled with a thick aura of death and her forehead was dark, she knew that Mother Zhu would pass away in a few days. Instead of selling tofu, Ning Shu stayed close to Mother Zhu to take care of her. She also recorded the date of Mother Zhu's death so that the geomancer could find a good grave for her. "Sun Yang, come to me." Mother Zhu, who was so sick that she couldn't even turn over, sat up on her own. Ning Shu waved at her. Ning Shu saw that Mother Zhu's complexion was better than before she was sick. He felt creeped out and walked over to ask, "Mother, what's wrong?" Mother Zhu reached out to hold Ning Shu's hand and patted the back of Ning Shu's hand with her other hand. Ning Shu wanted to withdraw his hand, but Mother Zhu held it. How could a sick person have so much strength? "You're a good woman and a good daughter-in-law. Yanqiu is lucky to have a daughter-in-law like you. After I leave, you and Yanqiu should live well and take care of Siyuan." Mother Zhu said to Ning Shu. "Yanqiu's father and I will rest in peace if we see you happy together in the underworld." Ning Shu just said, "Mother, don't say such discouraging words. You'll get better." Mother Zhu shook her head. "I dreamed of Master last night. He came to pick me up. I know my body can't take it anymore. Promise me that you'll live well with Yanqiu." Ning Shu nodded indifferently. He wasn't agitated by Mother Zhu's words. "Mother, don't worry. I'll live well." Living well didn't necessarily mean living with Zhu Yanqiu. Mother Zhu didn't hear Ning Shu's unspoken words and nodded with satisfaction. She looked out the door again and said with longing and sadness, "I wonder how Yanqiu is doing now." Zhu Yanqiu had left home to study in Shanghai when she was 18. She was almost 21 now. No wonder Mother Zhu wanted to see what Zhu Yanqiu looked like. Ning Shu helped Mother Zhu lie down. Mother Zhu's eyes were still fixed on the door. Ning Shu stayed close to Mother Zhu and placed Zhu Siyuan, who had fallen asleep in his arms, on the bed. When he returned to Mother Zhu's room, Ning Shu saw that she was already asleep. He called out to her, but there was no response. Ning Shu placed his hand in front of Mother Zhu's nose. She was no longer breathing. Ning Shu was quite scared to die in the middle of the night. He hurriedly went out and knocked on the door of the neighbor next door, asking for help. Ning Shu's eyes were red all the time. Hearing that Mother Zhu had passed away, the neighbors saw that it wasn't easy for Ning Shu to manage the funeral alone at home, so they all came to help. With everyone's help, Zhu Mu's mother's body was moved to the hall and laid in the middle of the hall. They began to clean Zhu Mu's mother's body and put on her shroud. They worked until dawn. Sun Yang, Zhu Yanxiu hasn't come back yet. Ning Shu, the auntie next door, asked, what will happen if she stays with the coffin? Ning Shu shook his head and anxiously argued for Zhu Yanxiu. Yanxiu is too busy with her studies. Siyuan and I will stay with the coffin. The people in the hall looked at each other. In the end, an elder in the family stood up and said, what scholar? Why didn't the old woman come back? Ning Shu lowered his head and didn't say anything. Ning Shu and the little boy, Zhu Siyuan, were the ones staying with the coffin. They wore coarse white clothes and knelt in front of the coffin to burn paper. Zhu Siyuan was confused and didn't understand what was going on. Ning Shu spent a lot of money to hire a feng shui master to find a good grave. She also hired a chef to prepare food and wine for the relatives, friends, and elders in the family who came to pay their respects. In short, Ning Shu was in charge of all these things. He even hired a Swana team to play the drums and beat the drums. They were going to bury Zhu Mu's mother grandly. Because they needed a man to send the coffin, the only man at home was Zhu Siyuan. However, Zhu Siyuan was confused. The feng shui master told Ning Shu to hold the child. The child held a small incense burner in his hand. There was a stick of incense in the burner and it was fine as long as the incense didn't go out or the burner was knocked over. After going through the entire process of the funeral, Ning Shu carried Zhu Siyuan and walked at the front of the funeral procession. She didn't even look back as she walked to the chosen grave. Fortunately, nothing went wrong during the process. Zhu Mu's mother was successfully buried. Ning Shu watched as the soil gradually covered the coffin. Zhu Mu's mother hadn't suffered much in her life. She was the daughter of a rich family. Then, she married the scholar, Old Master Zhu. Her family declined, and Zhu Sunyang took care of her like she was her own mother. She probably used up all her blessings in this life. Zhu Yanxiu didn't succeed in life. After Zhu Mu's mother was buried, Ning Shu didn't send Zhu Yanxiu any more telegrams. Even if Zhu Yanxiu sent a telegram, Ning Shu would tear it up after reading it. Sometimes, he would take it back and give it to Zhu Siyuan to make paper airplanes. Ning Shu was still making tofu. However, there were restaurants that liked Ning Shu's dried tofu. They would sell some tofu every day. His life was much better than before. He had accumulated some money. He used most of it to buy food and store it. After being fed by Ning Shu for a period of time, Zhu Siyuan was much fatter than before. Her hair was not as yellow as before. Ning Shu had been recuperating this body. In addition, she had some success in cultivating the peerless martial arts when she was free, so her strength was much greater than before. Ning Shu had been looking for a suitable weapon for himself. In this era, guns were the most powerful weapons. However, Ning Shu didn't have the means to get a gun. Was he going to carry a big knife and be a heroine? It was better to use a hidden weapon. It was convenient to carry and hide. Ning Shu asked the blacksmith to get her a large needle. It was about the size of a nail, but much sharper than a nail. When Ning Shu had nothing to do, she would practice swinging the needle in the yard to practice her aim. The world would only become more and more chaotic. When the Japanese trampled on the land, the whole nation was wailing and struggling in pain. Ning Shu went to the pharmacy to get some medicine. He made some poisonous powder and some medicinal powder that could stop bleeding and treat external injuries. A woman and a child were both vulnerable and easy to be bullied. When he was free, Ning Shu also let Zhu Siyuan run around the yard and do the horse stance to train his body. However, Zhu Siyuan was just a child. He didn't know how to think, so Ning Shu could only strengthen himself. Ning Shu still went out to sell tofu every day. However, the atmosphere in the town was not right. It was filled with a panicked atmosphere. The Japanese launched the September 18th incident. Because the central government didn't resist the policy, the northeast warlord Zhang Xueliang didn't resist and retreated into the pass. As a result, the three northeast provinces quickly fell. The whole society was condemning Zhang Xueliang and the Nanjing central government. These were too high and mighty for the people. Because of the fall of the three northeast provinces, many people fled the northeast and poured into other places. Moreover, after the Japanese occupied the three northeast provinces, they continued to expand. It was very likely that they would attack this place. The influx of these refugees would cause a lot of chaos. In this national war, everyone was helpless and precarious. Ning Shu truly felt the insignificance of an individual. Many people in the town had already started to move. When someone took the lead to move, the others followed blindly. They were afraid to be a step slower. Chapter 564. Ning Shu also started to move, because there would be a large number of refugees here soon. They would do anything for a bite of food. Especially a woman like her, she could easily become the target of refugees. In the plot, Zhu Sunyang took her child to Shanghai. She went to find Zhu Yanqiu with excitement and fear, and went to Shanghai, which was full of life and luxury. Zhu Sunyang was confused when she arrived in Shanghai. Gage didn't come, and she found that Zhu Yanqiu had a girl he liked, which made Zhu Sunyang even more uneasy and scared. Zhu Yanqiu was not happy about Zhu Sunyang's arrival. He even disliked her in his heart. When he introduced Zhu Sunyang to others, he said that Zhu Sunyang was his sister. Zhu Sunyang was about 5 years older than Zhu Yanqiu. Plus, she worked hard in life, so she looked older than Zhu Yanqiu, who was handsome and full of intellectual aura. Zhu Sunyang was a little sad. She was Zhu Yanqiu's wife, but he said that she was his sister. Zhu Yanqiu's reason was that he didn't want his classmates to know that he had a family and was a child bride. Such a futile way would be laughed at by his classmates. Zhu Sunyang was not a very opinionated person. When others asked her, she would say that she was Zhu Yanqiu's sister. Later, Zhu Sunyang really couldn't get used to the life in Shanghai. Looking at her husband, who was wearing a white shirt and a cap, she felt very strange and distant. She took her child back to the small town and lived a bitter life. Zhu Yanqiu didn't ask Zhu Sunyang to stay. Maybe in Zhu Yanqiu's heart, Zhu Sunyang and Zhu Siyuan were shameful existences, and he even regretted consummating with Zhu Sunyang. Ning Shu still planned to go to Shanghai to avoid the flow of refugees, but he didn't know what would happen this time. Oh, haha. There were already many refugees in the small town. Some refugees even crossed the wall and ran to Ning Shu's house to rob. First, they ran to the kitchen to grab the leftovers and ate fiercely. Then they threatened Ning Shu, hand over the food at home. Ning Shu punched and kicked the robber, kicked him out of the yard, and closed the door. Ning Shu bought a ship ticket to Shanghai. Now, a ship ticket actually cost 10 yuan. Ning Shu paid for it and carried Zhu Siyuan onto the ship with the things in her arms. There were many people on the ship and it was very crowded. Ning Shu sat in a corner with the child in his arms. He glanced around and saw that everyone's faces were filled with uneasiness and panic. The country was in turmoil, and the people were displaced. This war could be said to be the most serious foreign disaster in history. The prolonged destruction caused the land under their feet to be devastated. Zhu Siyuan was a little scared. Ning Shu patted his back to comfort him. When Ning Shu was hungry, he secretly ate some cornbread and stuffed a fasting pill into the child's mouth. The smell in the cabin was unbearable. The smell of smoke and stench mixed together was simply unbearable. The ship continued to stop and more people squeezed onto the ship, making the environment on the ship even worse. Finally, a week later, they arrived at Huangpu Pier. Ning Shu carried the child off the ship and let out a long breath. They had finally arrived. Standing on the pier, Ning Shu felt that the wind blowing from the Huangpu River was indeed cold and damp. It was really good. He wondered if Zhu Yanxiu had frozen to death. Ning Shu didn't plan to find Zhu Yanxiu. He didn't want to wash clothes and cook for Zhu Yanxiu. Zhu Yanxiu would tell everyone that this was his sister. Sister, your sister. Ning Shu found a small hotel and simply cleaned up. The environment in the cabin was too dirty and bad. Zhu Xiyuan had been listless the whole time. Ning Shu touched Zhu Xiyuan's head. He had a fever. Ning Shu gave the child the fever medicine that he had exchanged before the mission. After taking the medicine, Zhu Xiyuan fell into a deep sleep, sweating all over. Ning Shu used the kettle to mix hot water with cold water. He endured the cold and took a bath. Then, he wiped the sweat off the child's body. Now, Ning Shu wanted to settle down. He planned to rent a house and then find a job. Zhu Xiyuan had reached the age where he should go to school. Ning Shu wanted Zhu Xiyuan to receive a good education. More importantly, he wanted to cultivate Zhu Xiyuan's will. Zhu Yanxiu was a cultured person, but the things she did were worse than pigs and dogs. In the end, she was successful and famous. How unreconciled. Moreover, he also had to work hard to start a new life for Zhu Su and Yang. He had to live a glorious life in this chaotic world. Ning Shu hugged Zhu Xiyuan and slept soundly on the bed. He basically didn't close his eyes on the ship. He was very tired now. The next day, Ning Shu wrapped Zhu Xiyuan tightly. He went out of the hotel and began to look for a house. He bought soup dumplings for Zhu Xiyuan. Zhu Xiyuan ate happily. He stuffed the dumplings into Ning Shu's mouth and said in a childish voice, Mommy eat too. Ning Shu's heart was very warm. This was the second time she was a nanny. Thinking of this child being ignorant and incompetent in the future, Ning Shu shook his head. He couldn't walk on that kind of path. Although he was angry at Zhu Yanxiu, that kind of behavior was also a kind of incompetence. Powerful people wouldn't use this kind of method to take revenge on others. Zhu Xiyuan was Zhu Yanxiu's son. That was why Zhu Xiyuan used this kind of method to take revenge on Zhu Yanxiu. In the end, Zhu Su, Nyang and Zhu Xiyuan were too weak. Zhu Xiyuan had Zhu Su, Nyang in his heart, so Zhu Su, Nyang wanted to take care of the child and live a good life. Shanghai was very prosperous. There were many shops. Beautiful dresses and gems were displayed in the windows. The sign of the disco hall was flashing with neon lights. The streets were full of traffic. Rickshaws came and went. Cable cars passed by on the street. The sound of bicycle bells mixed with the cries of newspaper sellers. This was a tolerant and modern city. Zhu Yanxiu didn't want to go back after coming here. Ning Shu wanted to find a place to rent. He bought 2 newspapers from the newspaper seller and asked him where there was a place to rent a house. As a result, the newspaper seller took Ning Shu to a tube-shaped apartment. There were all kinds of clothes hanging on the ceiling. It was like a pig cage village. There were so many people crowded together, eating and drinking in the small yard. Ning Shu wanted to give Zhu Xiyuan a better environment. He didn't gain anything for the day. After eating his fill outside, he returned to the hotel and paid for the room for the day. To understand a city, one had to read the city's newspaper. There was a lot of information in the newspaper. In short, too many things happened in Shanghai every day. It could be described as changing with each passing day. There were gangs, such as the Qin gang and the Hong gang, as well as renting places and patrolling houses. All kinds of forces mixed together, which made Shanghai burst with endless opportunities. Anything could happen here. This city was prosperous but also chaotic. Ning Shu had to do his best to protect himself and his child. Ning Shu saw in the newspaper at the hospital was recruiting nurses. He planned to give it a try. What could he eat if he didn't earn money? He only had a little money. Was he going to beg for money after using it up? Ning Shu planned to walk the path of a doctor. He kissed Zhu Xiyuan and said, "Baby, mother wants to be a doctor." Zhu Xiyuan clapped his hands and repeated happily, "Doctor, doctor, doctor." Chapter 565. The next morning, Ning Shu went to the hospital to apply for a job. Ning Shu did not have much confidence when he went to the hospital with his child. When he arrived at the hospital, he was told that they only wanted young girls. It would be best if they graduated from a nursing school. When he saw Ning Shu carrying his child and wearing a large cotton-padded jacket, he was tactfully told that he was not suitable. Ning Shu sighed and said, "I know a little about nursing and I know Chinese medicine. My ancestors were from a family of imperial physicians, but they have declined." Ning Shu was talking nonsense to create a very powerful family background for himself. The interviewer just looked at Ning Shu and said, "There is a special job, which is to be a battlefield doctor. They are training you now. Do you want to try?" Ning Shu, this was going to be a battlefield. If she was unfortunately hit by a stray bullet and died on the battlefield, what would happen to Zhu Xiyuan who was in her arms? Ning Shu looked at the young girls with braids beside him. They were really beautiful. He really did not have any competition. Ning Shu thought in his heart. Fang Feifei was a war reporter. She became a battlefield doctor. They would meet sooner or later. Ning Shu looked at the ignorant Zhu Xiyuan and asked, "Are there any benefits? If something happens to me on the battlefield, what will happen to my child? Also, I don't have a house to live in now. The country will take care of your child. You can rest assured." "You have to sign the document," the interviewer said. Ning Shu frowned and said, "I don't have a house to live in." Being a military doctor was basically a suicide mission. This was a high-risk job. Ning Shu had to apply for benefits. Moreover, after she died, the country might not be able to raise her child for her. The documents might also be useless. In the following period of time, the whole nation would be in a very chaotic situation. Who would remember a child? You will get a salary of 5 yuan a month and a small suite assigned to you by the hospital. It will be enough for you and your child to live in, the interviewer said. At this time, a professor at Tsinghua University only earned 7 or 8 yuan a month. 5 yuan was indeed not a low salary. Ning Shu thought that she didn't have much money in her pocket. The room fee of a small hotel was very expensive. Even if it was to compete with Zhu Yanxiu and Fang Feifei, she had to take this job. "I'm willing." Ning Shu nodded. The interviewers were very happy. No one was willing to become a military doctor in the entire morning. This was a job where one's head was tied to one's belt. One moment, they might be holding a scalpel, and the next moment, they might be hit by a bomb. The environment was very bad, and it was not as comfortable as a hospital. The interviewer also saw that Ning Shu was dressed like a country bumpkin, so he managed to convince Ning Shu to become an intern military doctor. "Sign here." The man took out a document and pushed it in front of Ning Shu. "Do you know how to write your name?" Ning Shu picked up the pen and hesitated for a moment before signing Zhu Sunyang's name on the document. "Very good." The man put away the document. Ning Shu hugged Zhu Xiyuan and kissed her. "Mother has become a doctor." Zhu Xiyuan giggled. The hospital assigned a house to Ning Shu. The house was not big, and there were all kinds of furniture. It was very simple and not gorgeous at all. Ning Shu was very satisfied. Now, there were many people living on the streets. Moreover, this house was under her name, so it could be considered her property. In the future, when the country developed rapidly, the housing price in Shanghai would be very expensive. It could be considered that Zhu Xiyuan had accumulated a family property. They checked out of the room at the small hotel and carried their luggage to the new house. Ning Shu let Zhu Xiyuan play by herself and cleaned all the corners of the house. Looking at the clean room, Ning Shu's heart was filled with indescribable joy. Her body even trembled slightly. This was Zhu Sunyang's emotion. She was so happy just to have an independent house of her own. She had her own house in Shanghai. Even Zhu Yanxiu did not have her own house in Shanghai. Next, Ning Shu began the military doctor training. Military doctors in the field could not treat diseases such as coronary heart disease and high blood pressure, but they had to be good at treating war injuries, such as trench foot, burns, all kinds of penetrating wounds, lacerations, dysentery, and so on. As for medical conditions, they used whatever they had at hand. Without disinfection, anesthetics, or scalpels, they dared to amputate with a military knife or a fruit knife. They used the fastest and most violent way to save a soldier's life. Military doctors were soldiers first, and then doctors. They had to have a strong physique and be able to find survival items and medical equipment from the surrounding environment. They not only had to save people, but also protect their own safety. In short, it was a very dangerous job, and it was also a job that tested one's psychological quality. Listening to the fighting outside and the sound of gunfire, they had to be able to take the bullets out of the soldiers' bodies without shaking their hands. Ning Shu took the child to the training site. There were only 3 men who came to participate in the training. Including Ning Shu, there were 4 people in total. No wonder the interviewer accepted her because she was a woman. Although the Japanese occupied the 3 northeastern provinces, Shanghai was still very prosperous, full of singing and dancing. Although every day there were newspaper sellers shouting that the 3 northeastern provinces had fallen under the Japanese's iron heel, most people did not realize the cruelty of the war. They did not have the consciousness and ambition to become a military doctor in the field with the army. When the 3 men saw Ning Shu holding a child, they showed sarcastic expressions, but they did not say anything excessive. A woman was very brave to be a military doctor in the field. The military doctor in the field taught Ning Shu and the other 3 how to bandage the soldiers' wounds and how to solve various problems. Ning Shu took a notebook and wrote it down carefully. These were all life-saving things. If he learned them well, he would have a better chance to survive on the battlefield. She did not have the good luck of Zhu Yanxiu and Fang Feifei, so she could only work hard by herself. There were also physical training courses, the most basic boxing, and gun training. Ning Shu could not wait to pick up the gun. It was heavy and even very old-fashioned. It almost went off accidentally, but it was indeed a weapon with great lethality in this era. Ning Shu shot at the target, and the result was not bad. The military doctor's physical training was not a big deal for Ning Shu. After all, she had cultivated peerless martial arts. Although she had only cultivated a strand of qi energy the size of a strand of hair, the qi energy would slowly repair her body, making her physical fitness better and better. Her strength was even greater than 2 men. In terms of physical fitness, the other 3 men were not as good as Ning Shu. During fighting, Ning Shu could even defeat the 3 men. After a day of training, Ning Shu took Zhu Xiyuan home to cook and wash clothes. It was much easier than making tofu day and night in his hometown. He could also play with Zhu Xiyuan. Ning Shu bought some colorful picture books for Zhu Xiyuan. Zhu Xiyuan was speaking more and more clearly now. He could clearly express his intentions and feelings. Ning Shu felt a sense of pride as a parent again. Chapter 566. It had been a while since they arrived in Shanghai. Ning Shu didn't go to see Zhu Yanxiu. She spent her time every day either learning the basic knowledge of a military doctor or slowly teaching Zhu Xiyuan how to read and count his fingers. Occasionally, she would go to the hospital to be an intern nurse to take care of patients. It was also an early attempt to adapt to the identity of a doctor. She lived a fulfilling life every day for herself, not to provide for Zhu Yanqiu. To be honest, Zhu Sunyang had never lived for herself. She was sold to the Zhu family as a child bride when she was young. Then, she took care of Zhu Yanqiu, who was younger than her, every day. After the Zhu family fell, she worked hard to provide for Zhu Yanqiu's studies. When Zhu Yanqiu became successful and famous, she retired. Zhu Sunyang's role was to provide for Zhu Yanqiu until she died. How sad was that? And Zhu Yanqiu hadn't acknowledged her in his heart. Ning Shu put on a nurse's uniform, a hat on his head, and a mask covering half of his face. He walked into the ward and saw many students in Chinese tunic suits. There were also some female students. When Ning Shu saw this situation, she understood that these ambitious youths were holding banners and parading on the streets again. They had a conflict with the police in the patrol office and were beaten up. All of them had injuries on their bodies. However, Ning Shu saw an acquaintance. Ning Shu didn't expect that she and Zhu Yanqiu would meet in this way, as a patient and a doctor. Ning Shu glanced at Zhu Siyuan, who was sitting obediently on a chair in the aisle and reading a book. "Child, come and see what your father looks like." Ning Shu walked over to Zhu Yanqiu and looked at Zhu Yanqiu. Zhu Yanqiu's face was white, and his eyebrows and eyes were square. He was very handsome in the Chinese tunic suit and had the gentleness of a scholar. Compared to Zhu Sunyang's memory, Zhu Yanqiu's face was very young. Now, he looked more mature. However, his face was bruised, the corner of his mouth was broken, and several buttons on his clothes were torn off. Ning Shu was about to speak when a female student walked over and said to Zhu Yanqiu, "Yanqiu, are you okay?" "Yanqiu." Such an intimate form of address. Ning Shu looked at the female student. She had short hair, fair skin, soft facial features, and firm almond-shaped eyes. It was obvious that she had her own ideas. She looked at Zhu Yanqiu with worry in her eyes. "Is it very painful? You shouldn't have stood in front of me at that time." "It's okay. It's better for me to be injured than for you to be injured. It's okay. It's not very painful." Zhu Yanqiu comforted the female student softly. "Don't do this again. I'm worried." The female student pursed her lips. "I'll protect myself." Zhu Yanqiu took the female student's hand. "You're a girl, you can't beat them. They have guns and military sticks in their hands." Ning Shu raised his eyebrows and looked at the interaction between the two. This female student should be Fang Feifei. She was indeed beautiful and full of vitality. She was totally different from Zhu Sunyang, who carried a pole every day and sold tofu under the sun and wind. Fang Feifei had an intellectual and elegant temperament. The determination and stubbornness between her brows made people feel that there was a huge amount of energy hidden in her small body. Zhu Yanqiu didn't tell Fang Feifei that he already had a wife and a child. Ning Shu coughed. Fang Feifei turned her head and saw Ning Shu. She quickly said, "Nurse, quickly take a look at his injury." "Let me see." Ning Shu turned Zhu Yanqiu's face left and right and said lightly, "It's okay. It's just a flesh wound. It'll be fine after applying some medicine." As Ning Shu spoke, he opened a bottle cap and used a clip to pick up a small ball of cotton and dipped it in the medicine. Ning Shu curled the corner of his mouth and pressed hard on the corner of Zhu Yanqiu's mouth. Zhu Yanqiu immediately screamed in pain and covered her mouth to breathe. Ning Shu said unhappily, "Why are you moving? It'll definitely hurt a little to apply medicine." At this moment, Ning Shu was wearing a mask, so Zhu Yanqiu couldn't tell that this black-hearted nurse was his wife. She only felt that this nurse's attitude was really bad. She pressed hard on the wound, and with the alcohol in the medicine, the wound hurt so much that it seemed to be torn again. "Yanqiu, bear with it." Fang Feifei comforted Zhu Yanqiu and said politely to Ning Shu, "Nurse, let me apply medicine for him." Ning Shu's voice was muffled through the mask. No need. This is my job. Fang Feifei couldn't snatch things from him, so she could only watch from the side. Ning Shu dipped the cotton ball in the medicine again and applied it on Zhu Yanqiu's face. He still used a lot of strength. Zhu Yanqiu was in so much pain that she kept breathing. In the end, she couldn't help but dodge the clip in Ning Shu's hand. Why are you dodging? Ning Shu said unhappily. Zhu Yanqiu felt that she had only met this kind of nurse after 8 lifetimes. She wasn't gentle at all. Feifei, you go back first. It's getting dark. Zhu Yanqiu didn't want Fang Feifei to see her in such a sorry state. Fang Feifei took a look outside. It was getting dark, but when she saw Zhu Yanqiu's face, she said worriedly, your injury? It's okay. You go back first. It's not safe when it's dark. When Zhu Yanqiu spoke to Fang Feifei, her eyes were full of affection and her voice was gentle. Ning Shu looked at her gentle appearance and curled the corner of his mouth. His hand holding the clip was eager to try. In his memory, Zhu Yanqiu had never talked to Zhu Sunyang like this. She had always had a superior attitude, especially when she was young. She used Zhu Sunyang as a maid. Zhu Sunyang took care of all his meals and clothes. In summer, she had to fan him all night and drive away mosquitoes. It was not until Zhu Yanqiu and Zhu Yanqiu consummated their marriage that Zhu Yanqiu's attitude towards Zhu Sunyang became a little better. Now seeing Zhu Yanqiu's attitude towards Fang Feifei, Ning Shu could only say that the gap between people was huge. No matter how much you did, others couldn't see it. Fang Feifei saw that Zhu Yanqiu insisted on letting her go, and her tone was full of worry for her. She nodded, smiled at Zhu Yanqiu with her white teeth, and then left. Zhu Yanqiu kept looking at Fang Feifei's back. The tenderness in her eyes could turn into water and pour out. Ning Shu picked up a cotton ball and wiped Zhu Yanqiu's face. Zhu Yanqiu grimaced in pain and said with anger, "What's with your attitude? Can't you be gentler?" "No." Ning Shu said lightly, "I'm already very gentle. Your wound hurts, but you blame me for using too much strength. You intellectuals are unreasonable. Okay, you don't have to deal with it." Zhu Yanqiu pushed away Ning Shu's hand. Especially when she saw the snow-white silver clip in Ning Shu's hand, she felt that the wound was very painful. Ning Shu didn't force her. He closed the medicine bottle and said, "Medical expenses." A trace of embarrassment flashed across Zhu Yanqiu's face. She felt up and down, but there was no money on her. Ning Shu said, "Today's parade. I didn't bring any money." Ning Shu looked at Zhu Yanqiu coldly. Zhu Yanqiu was a little embarrassed by Ning Shu's stare. She took off the watch on her wrist and said with pride, "This is a German-Swiss mechanical watch. I'll leave it with you first. I'll come to pay the medical expenses tomorrow." Chapter 567. Zhu Yanqiu really had no money. His family hadn't sent him money for a long time. Now, he rarely went out to play with Fang Feifei. They used to go to the movies when they were free. Now, Zhu Yanqiu could only use studying to fool Fang Feifei. But Zhu Yanqiu was a smart person. He asked Fang Feifei to read books in the library. They sat by the window. The sunlight was hazy and beautiful through the window. Zhu Yanqiu took a pencil and drew Fang Feifei on the white paper. Occasionally, he would write a hazy and romantic love poem. On the basis of not wasting money, he tried his best to be romantic. Fortunately, Fang Feifei was a literary young woman. She liked this very much and didn't notice Zhu Yanqiu's financial difficulties at all. Now, Ning Shu asked Zhu Yanqiu for medical expenses. Zhu Yanqiu didn't have any money, so he could only say that he didn't have any money. He also pretended to give his watch to Ning Shu as collateral. Ning Shu raised his eyebrows and took the watch. The watch was still a bit heavy. It looked very delicate. The small hands were unique and didn't feel like it was made in a rough way. It didn't look cheap at all. How much is this? Ning Shu asked. Zhu Yanqiu looked complacent and said, 1,000 yuan. Is it enough for medical expenses? Ning Shu wanted to poke Zhu Yanqiu's face with a clip and poke his face. 1,000 yuan to buy a watch, Now, 1 yuan could buy more than 170 kilograms of rice. An ordinary family of 3 could live for a year with 2 or 3 yuan, and 500 yuan could buy an ordinary house. What Zhu Yanqiu did was simply not something a human could do. He tired Zhu Sunyang to death, but Zhu Yanqiu wore such a luxury watch. Why do I want your watch? The medical expenses are less than 1/10,000th of this watch. I don't want the watch. I want money. Ning Shu threw the watch to Zhu Yanqiu. Zhu Yanqiu caught the watch in a panic and said, "This watch is very expensive. You can't afford to pay for it if it's broken." Medical expenses. Ning Shu said lightly, "Don't tell me you don't have money. You're pretending to be poor. Wearing such an expensive watch, you don't have any money on you." "I already said that I didn't bring any money with me today," Zhu Yanqiu said with a red face. Together with the injuries on her face was purple. Ning Shu looked at Zhu Yanqiu without saying anything. In the end, other students helped to pay for the medical expenses. Zhu Yanqiu immediately put the watch on her wrist and thanked the student, saying that she would pay him back in the future. Zhu Yanqiu walked out of the ward and saw Zhu Xiyuan sitting on the chair and reading. He looked very serious. She squatted in front of Zhu Xiyuan and asked, "Little friend, why are you here alone? What's your name?" Ning Shu was packing up when he saw Zhu Yanqiu and Zhu Xiyuan talking. His heart skipped a beat. He was about to take the child away when he heard Zhu Xiyuan say to Zhu Yanqiu, "You're so ugly." Zhu Xiyuan's voice was childish, but his expression was very serious. After arriving in Shanghai, Ning Shu dressed Zhu Xiyuan up nicely. Zhu Xiyuan was white and tender. Now that he said that Zhu Xiyuan was ugly with a serious face, it was simply ridiculous. Zhu Yanqiu's current image was indeed a little bad. Her face was bruised and purple, and she had also applied medicine. Her face was simply unbearable to look at. Zhu Yanqiu was embarrassed and a little angry when a child said that. "Children are so rude," Zhu Yanqiu said, then turned and left. This was the first time the father and son met, and they parted on bad terms. In fact, the father and son's birth characters were not harmonious. Ning Shu handed the child to a familiar nurse and said to Zhu Xiyuan, "Xiyuan, wait for mother here obediently. Mother will be back soon." Zhu Xiyuan nodded obediently and said, Ning Shu took off the nurse's uniform, took off the mask, and followed Zhu Yanqiu out of the hospital. At this time, the sky had begun to darken. Zhu Yanqiu, who was walking in front, did not notice that someone was following her. When they passed by a small alley, Ning Shu took off his coat and quickly ran to Zhu Yanqiu's side. He covered his head with the coat and dragged him into the alley. Zhu Yanqiu was walking when she saw darkness in front of her, and then she was dragged away. Zhu Yanqiu was shocked and struggled violently. However, the other party was so strong that she could not break free. Ning Shu beat Zhu Yanqiu fiercely. He kicked and punched Zhu Yanqiu's face. Zhu Yanqiu was already injured, and he was beaten by Ning Shu until he screamed. "You are..." Zhu Yanqiu wanted to speak, and wanted to take off the clothes on his head, but a fist hit his face, followed by a kick to his stomach. Zhu Yanqiu vomited. Ning Shu punched his liver with his left hook and swept Zhu Yanqiu's lower body with a spinning kick. Zhu Yanqiu fell to the ground with a bang and could not get up for a long time. Ning Shu leaned over and took off the watch on Zhu Yanqiu's wrist. Then he took off his clothes, leaving him only a pair of underpants. Zhu Yanqiu had been beaten by Ning Shu until he could not fight back. His bones were broken, and his eyes were swollen and could not open. His clothes were taken off by someone else. Zhu Yanqiu's heart was filled with fear. Was he raped by a man? Ning Shu was very strong. Zhu Yanqiu believed that the person who beat him was a man. Ning Shu looked at Zhu Yanqiu, who was as white as a cut chicken, and his heart was filled with killing intent. He might as well kill him. This kind of person's death was not worth pitying. Moreover, with Zhu Yanqiu's luck, he would become rich in the end. With tens of thousands of people under him, she would not be able to defeat him. Ning Shu reached out and grabbed Zhu Yanqiu's neck very hard. Zhu Yanqiu struggled violently. She pulled away Ning Shu's hand that was on her neck and shouted with a hoarse voice, help me. Until now, Zhu Yanqiu had not seen what the other party looked like. Her lungs were burning with pain as if they were about to explode. Let go, Ning Shu used more strength. At this time, footsteps and the sound of people talking came from not far away in the alley. It was probably the patrol officers patrolling. Ning Shu gritted his teeth. Zhu Yanqiu was really lucky. Ning Shu let go of Zhu Yanqiu's neck. He clenched his hand into a fist and punched Zhu Yanqiu's heart. Zhu Yanqiu spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground softly. He coughed violently and choked on the blood in his mouth. Ning Shu put it over Zhu Yanqiu's head, turned around and ran away. The patrol officers used their flashlights to see Zhu Yanqiu, who was naked and unconscious on the ground. Ning Shu put the things he took from Zhu Yanqiu in a bag and then returned to the hospital to pick up Zhu Xiyuan. Ning Shu did not stay in the hospital and went back with Zhu Xiyuan on his back. Zhu Xiyuan lay on Ning Shu's back. Ning Shu asked, "Mother, what is an impolite child?" Ning Shu said indifferently, "Mother, Xiyuan is a polite child. It's just that Xiyuan told the truth and made that petty person unhappy." "Mother, that person is really ugly and annoying," Zhu Xiyuan said. Chapter 568. Ning Shu went to the cake shop and bought a small cake for Zhu Xiyuan. Today was Zhu Xiyuan's 3rd birthday. Soon, Zhu Xiyuan would go to school. Ning Shu hoped to make arrangements for Zhu Xiyuan before going to the battlefield. In fact, Ning Shu wanted to take Zhu Xiyuan with him, but she was a military doctor. Taking care of a child like Zhu Xiyuan could easily cause problems. If the environment was too bad, the child would get sick. Fortunately, they were only training reserve military doctors now. They were not in a hurry to send her to the battlefield. There were still a few years before the all-out war against Japan. She still had a lot of time to be with Zhu Xiyuan. Going to the battlefield was destined, and she had signed the document. If she went back on her words, she would probably end up miserable. In troubled times, human lives were the most worthless. Ning Shu's biggest wish was to protect himself and Zhu Xiyuan. At the same time, he would train Zhu Xiyuan and not let him become a playboy. Back home, Ning Shu put the candles on the cake and said to Zhu Xiyuan, "Xiyuan, make a wish on the cake." "What is a wish?" Zhu Xiyuan looked confused. Ning Shu asked again, "What does Xiyuan want to do the most?" "Xiyuan and mother always be together," Zhu Xiyuan said. Oh, this was so heartwarming. Ning Shu and Zhu Xiyuan blew out the candles and cut the cake. The mother and son ate the cake. After washing Zhu Xiyuan's hands and feet, Ning Shu told a story to Zhu Xiyuan, who was lying on the bed. Seeing that Zhu Xiyuan had fallen asleep, Ning Shu touched Zhu Xiyuan's head inside in his heart. Zhu Xiyuan was a child neglected by his parents. Needless to say, his father did not know him, so he knew nothing about Zhu Xiyuan. On the other hand, Zhu Xunyang worked hard all day, working day and night to earn money. It was inevitable that she would neglect Zhu Xiyuan. Later on, when her personality became like that, how could she not feel stifled in her heart? How could she not be looking forward to going against her own father like that? A child who lacked love. After Zhu Xiyuan fell asleep, Ning Shu took out Zhu Yanqiu's things from the bag. There was a sweater, a school uniform, a watch that cost 1,000 yuan, and a pen. Ning Shu saw that the pen was very well made. There were even engravings on it. The words, Yanqiu, were engraved on it. Ning Shu took out a dagger and scratched out the engravings. Then he turned the Chinese tunic uniform over and over again and found that Zhu Yanqiu's name was embroidered on the collar. Ning Shu picked up the thread that embroidered the name with a needle. There was dirt on the clothes, so Ning Shu washed them. When the clothes were dry, Ning Shu packed everything and took it to the pawn shop to pawn the clothes, pen, and watch. Originally, a watch that cost 1,000 renminbi could only be sold for 500 renminbi, but Ning Shu was not happy. The watch looked like it was still 90% new. In the end, they bargained for 650 renminbi and the deal was made. After pawning off the pen and clothes, there were more than 10 yuan, which was not a small sum. Sure enough, it was a robbery. The things that Zhu Yanqiu bought had emptied the Zhu family's pockets. After getting more than 600 renminbi, Ning Shu felt that he could be considered a rich man. With money, Ning Shu consciously began to store food. The prices in this era were not stable at all. Ning Shu did not want to waste the money in his hands. Ning Shu took the money and bought another house and some wasteland. The wasteland was very cheap. Although Shanghai was prosperous now, some places had not yet been developed. Thinking of the price of housing in the future, Ning Shu consciously stored up land. However, he only dared to buy small pieces of land, and it was far away from the prosperous areas now. Besides, he could not afford to buy large pieces of land. After the mission was completed, he would leave the world. Ning Shu hoped that Zhu Sunyang and Zhu Xiyuan could live more comfortably. After the training, Ning Shu went to the hospital for an internship. Zhu Yanqiu, who was beaten to death by Ning Shu, was sent to the hospital. Looking at Zhu Yanqiu lying on the bed like a pig's head, Ning Shu could only say that the scourge lived for 1,000 years. When he wanted to kill Zhu Yanqiu, the patrolman appeared. Ning Shu was very disappointed. He really wanted to kill Zhu Yanqiu 100 times, 100 times. Fang Feifei sat by the bed with tears in her eyes. She looked angry and asked Zhu Yanqiu, "Who did it?" "He is too arrogant." Zhu Yanqiu's throat was so painful that he could not speak. His neck, which was broken by the mysterious person, seemed to be broken. Zhu Yanqiu did not know who he had offended. Not only did the mysterious person rob him, but also wanted to kill him. Zhu Yanqiu now had goosebumps all over his body when he thought about it. The mysterious person really wanted to kill him with a strong murderous intent. Now Zhu Yanqiu was both mentally and physically exhausted. Now he was injured like this and had no money to stay in the hospital. He sent a telegram home, but his family did not reply to him. Zhu Yanqiu guessed that something had happened. He planned to go home, but now he was beaten so badly that he could not move. His head was dizzy, and he always felt nauseous. His heart ached as if it had been punched by someone. The doctor said that he had a concussion and a slight fracture of his leg bone. "Tell me, you were fine before," Fang Feifei asked anxiously. Her almond-shaped eyes were wide open, and she looked indignant. Zhu Yanqiu wanted to say something, but he could not. Ning Shu walked over, looked at Zhu Yanqiu and said in surprise, "How did you become like this? It was not so serious before." Zhu Yanqiu tried to open his eyes a little. When he saw Ning Shu wearing a mask, he suddenly felt pain all over his body. Could it be that the black-hearted nurse had applied medicine to him? The nurse who had applied medicine to him before was much gentler than this nurse. Zhu Yanqiu really wanted to tell Ning Shu to get out, get out, get out. Ning Shu took a pair of tongs, picked up a cotton ball, dipped it in medicine, and planned to apply it to Zhu Yanqiu's wound. Zhu Yanqiu tried hard to avoid it. Ning Shu said angrily, "Why are you dodging?" Then Ning Shu applied medicine to Zhu Yanqiu, but this time he did not use much strength. Ning Shu did not want him to faint. There would be more miserable things waiting for Zhu Yanqiu later. He applied medicine to Zhu Yanqiu's swollen face. This face was so swollen that it really took a lot of medicine. The doctor said that you still need to stay in the hospital. Now go and pay the medical fees. All the fees add up to about 5 yuan, Ning Shu said lightly. When Zhu Yanqiu heard 5 yuan, his face turned red. He was angry and anxious. Not to mention 5 yuan, he did not even have 1 yuan. Now he was so seriously injured. This was the first time in his life. Zhu Yanqiu was afraid that he would be disfigured. His leg was broken. Zhu Yanqiu was afraid that he would be crippled. Now he could not be driven out of the hospital. This was the first time Zhu Yanqiu thought of Zhu Sunyang. If Zhu Sunyang was here, she would definitely try to raise money for him. Ning Shu looked at Fang Feifei and said, "You are his girlfriend, right? It is not convenient for him to pay the fees now. Go and help him pay the fees." Fang Feifei was stunned. She pursed her lips and did not speak. "Feifei, all my money has been robbed." Zhu Yanqiu tried hard to say. His voice was hoarse and unpleasant. "Nonsense. You don't have a single yuan. Rob your sister." Ning Shu rolled his eyes. Chapter 569. $5 was a huge sum. Fang Feifei hesitated. Hearing Zhu Yanqiu's explanation, Fang Feifei felt helpless. "Feifei, I don't know who stole my money. I'll return it to you when I recover." Zhu Yanqiu could only be thick-skinned and ask Fang Feifei again. Zhu Yanqiu's voice contained suppressed awkwardness. In this situation, it was indeed quite awkward for Zhu Yanqiu to borrow money from Fang Feifei, especially since they were still a couple. When it came to money, she felt awkward and felt that it had tarnished her pure feelings. Now, Zhu Yanqiu and Fang Feifei were still in a relationship. They had not experienced life and death battles together. At most, they had a good impression of each other and were in the budding stage of their relationship. Zhu Yanqiu's request to borrow money made Fang Feifei feel strange. If it were any other girl, she would feel a little uncomfortable if her boyfriend wanted to borrow money from her. Her boyfriend, who should have been successful in everything, wanted to borrow money from her. She would feel that her boyfriend was useless. Ning Shu, who was watching from the side, said to Fang Feifei, "He is indeed seriously injured. If he is not treated, there may be a mark on his face. His leg is fractured. If he is not treated, there may be a permanent injury. There is also a concussion. This is the most serious. Are you sure you don't want to treat him?" Zhu Yanqiu could only stare at Fang Feifei with great effort. Seeing that Zhu Yanqiu and the nurse were staring at her, Fang Feifei could only nod and say to Zhu Yanqiu, "You don't have to worry about money. Just take care of yourself." Zhu Yanqiu let out a long sigh and reached out to grab Fang Feifei's hand. She said in a hoarse voice, "Feifei, thank you." Fang Feifei pushed Zhu Yanqiu's hand away and said, "I'm going to pay." Zhu Yanqiu's hand stopped awkwardly in the air, and then she retracted her hand as if nothing had happened. Seeing that the black-hearted nurse was still looking at her, she closed her eyes and ignored Ning Shu. Ning Shu didn't care about Zhu Yanqiu's disdain for him at all. He asked dutifully, "How do you feel now? Does your head still hurt? Do you still want to vomit?" Zhu Yanqiu didn't even open her eyes. Her tone was very bad. "As long as you're not here, I won't feel like vomiting." When Zhu Yanqiu spoke, she used a bit of force, causing the choking marks on his neck to become obvious. He looked very miserable. Ning Shu laughed wildly in his heart. "Serves you right. Ning Shu narrowed his eyes and looked at Zhu Yanqiu. Why don't I just kill him now? I can use the reason that the treatment is ineffective. Now, Zhu Yanqiu can be said to be alone. The Zhu family no longer exists, and his parents are dead. As for her, this child bride, Ning Shu has never seen Zhu Yanqiu as a husband. Ning Shu reached for the hidden weapon at his waist. He might as well kill him with the thick needle. Why are you still here? Zhu Yanqiu opened her swollen eyes. I don't need you now. Please leave. Ning Shu suppressed the killing intent in his heart and said indifferently, I'm going to check your body and wipe it. Zhu Yanqiu was very impatient. This nurse was really annoying. She didn't know why, but when she saw this nurse, Zhu Yanqiu had an inexplicable anger in her heart. Ning Shu only wanted to kill Zhu Yanqiu now. He walked towards Zhu Yanqiu with the hidden weapon in his hand. Zhu Yanqiu saw that the nurse didn't leave but approached her instead. She frowned and pulled the wound on her face. She gasped in pain. What's wrong with you? Ning Shu reached out and wanted to tidy up the quilt for Zhu Yanqiu. He held the hidden weapon between his fingers and wanted to stab Zhu Yanqiu's heart. However, a huge elastic force suddenly gushed out of her body, almost ejecting her soul out of Zhu Sunyu's body. Ning Shu staggered twice and steadied himself. Cold sweat broke out on his body. Yanqiu, I've already paid the fee. Coincidentally, Fang Feifei came in at this time. She glanced at Ning Shu and sat on the chair beside the bed. She said, You can rest well. Fang Feifei smiled sweetly and her voice was crisp. Thank you. Zhu Yanqiu's voice was full of tenderness. Ning Shu turned around and walked out of the ward. She didn't want to see the two of them being lovey-dovey. She wiped the cold sweat off her forehead and leaned against the wall weakly. She could only sigh in her heart. Ning Shu could only sigh. The situation just now was because of Zhu Sunyu's resistance. Zhu Sunyu didn't want him to kill Zhu Yanqiu. Zhu Sunyu couldn't do such a thing as killing her husband, nor did she want to bear the crime of killing her husband. Zhu Sunyu was a timid and humble woman who grew up under the feudal doctrine. She didn't dare to do such a rebellious thing. She was sold to the Zhu family since she was young. The servile nature in her bones was very strong. Zhu Sunyu was a timid and kind person. Zhu Sunyu couldn't bear to stain her hands with blood, and it was her husband's blood. No matter what, Zhu Yanqiu was her husband. Ning Shu could only smile and chuckle. As long as you're happy. Since Zhu Sunyu didn't want Zhu Yanqiu to die, then let him live. But it wasn't so easy for Zhu Yanqiu to become successful now. Ning Shu glanced into the ward. Fang Feifei was taking care of Zhu Yanqiu, whose face was swollen like a pig's head. After taking off the nurse's uniform, Ning Shu took Zhu Siyuan home. Zhu Siyuan asked Ning Shu, Mother, why don't I have a father? Zhu Siyuan often followed Ning Shu in and out of the hospital. Many people in the hospital knew Zhu Siyuan. Some gossipy people asked Zhu Siyuan who his father was. Zhu Siyuan was usually at a loss. Ning Shu heard this and said, Siyuan, you have a father. Your father is dead. Zhu Siyuan. Ning Shu said, Your father died and was buried in the ground, just like your grandmother. Zhu Siyuan looked a little depressed. Mother, I've never seen my father. It's okay. I don't know if there's a picture of your father at home. I'll look for it and let you see your father, Ning Shu said indifferently. Zhu Siyuan nodded and lay on Ning Shu's back. Ning Shu knew that as a single woman with a child, there would always be rumors. But these people actually asked Zhu Siyuan, which made Ning Shu feel very uncomfortable. The child didn't know anything. She couldn't let the child be in such a disadvantageous environment. It would affect Zhu Siyuan's mentality. Ning Shu hated Zhu Yanqiu very much. Since she couldn't kill Zhu Yanqiu, she would cripple him. He had good arms and legs, but he couldn't do delicate things. Zhu Yanqiu was someone who could kill enemies with a gun in the future. Haha, in this era of ups and downs, even without Zhu Yanqiu, there would still be people who would rise. This era didn't lack national heroes. Without Zhu Yanqiu, there would still be thousands of heroes. For Zhu Yanqiu to reach that step in the end, she had great luck on her body. But Ning Shu didn't want Zhu Yanqiu to be successful and have both power and beauty. Zhu Yanqiu forgot the tears of a woman. Zhu Yanqiu didn't have any gratitude or pity for Zhu Sunyang. He even treated Zhu Sunyang as a disgrace. How could a person who had received a new education have a child bride? Fang Feifei was his wife in this life. Chapter 570. In the past few days, Zhu Xiyuan's mood had not been very good. Obviously, it was because of his father. Ning Shu saw this and did not say anything. After the military medical course, Ning Shu went to the hospital. He glanced at the head nurse next to him and walked over to pour a glass of water. "Head nurse, are you busy?" The head nurse was a woman in her 40s. Her attitude towards Ning Shu was very cold. "I'm not busy. Head nurse, I heard that your son is studying in university and has a bright future." Ning Shu said calmly, "My child is still so young. The world is so chaotic now. I don't even know what to do in the future." Children were the best way to shorten the distance between women. The old nurse's face showed sympathy and her tone was gossipy. "It's really hard for a woman to raise a child. Where's the child's father?" Ning Shu's eyes turned red immediately. She said, "My husband went to study, but I haven't heard from him for a long time. I suspect that he's already dead. In addition, my hometown is too chaotic, so I brought my child to Shanghai to avoid the chaos and find the child's father." Ning Shu recounted her life story again. She made it sound as miserable as she could. The head nurse comforted Ning Shu. Then, Zhu Xiyuan's pitiful life story spread among the doctors and nurses. The curious people did not ask about Zhu Xiyuan's father. Sometimes, when they saw Zhu Xiyuan, they would even give him some worthless things. Ning Shu didn't want Zhu Yanqiu to know about her and her mother for the time being. If she knew, she wouldn't know what she would do. She might even drive them out of Shanghai. Ning Shu wanted to learn nursing knowledge now and make a name for herself on the battlefield. As for Zhu Yanqiu, didn't she look down on Zhu Sunyang? Ning Shu wanted Zhu Sunyang to become someone who was respected. Ning Shu carried the basin into the ward and asked Zhu Yanqiu, "How do you feel today?" Zhu Yanqiu opened her eyes and saw Ning Shu. Her expression immediately turned bad. "Much better." Ning Shu put down the basin and tidied up the blanket for Zhu Yanqiu. He squeezed the handkerchief and began to wipe Zhu Yanqiu's face and hands. Zhu Yanqiu saw that Ning Shu was gentle. She glanced at the mask on Ning Shu's face. "Why are you always wearing a mask?" Zhu Yanqiu sized up Ning Shu from left to right. She felt that this person was somewhat familiar, but she could not recall where she had seen him before. Zhu Yanqiu didn't even think about Zhu Sunyang. He believed that Zhu Sunyang knew how to make tofu, but Zhu Sunyang became a nurse. Zhu Yanqiu only had 2 words, impossible. Besides, Zhu Sunyang should be in her hometown now, not in Shanghai. But thinking of Zhu Sunyang, Zhu Yanqiu's heart was full of anger. Now Zhu Sunyang didn't send him a telegram or send him money. He sent a telegram home, but no one replied to him. Zhu Yanqiu had already decided that she would make a trip home after she recovered. Could it be that something had really happened at home? And she had no money on her, so she had to go home to get money. Ning Shu didn't say anything. He wiped Zhu Yanqiu's arm with a warm and wet handkerchief. When the handkerchief wiped her wrist, Zhu Yanqiu suddenly felt an extremely sharp pain. She quickly withdrew her hand and looked at her wrist. There was no injury, but she didn't know why it hurt. What did you do? Zhu Yanqiu roared angrily at Ning Shu. She turned her wrist over and over again. There was no wound and no bleeding, but she felt a sharp pain. Ning Shu looked at Zhu Yanqiu with a puzzled look and said speechlessly, "Did you really break your head?" "What did I do?" Zhu Yanqiu frowned tightly. Ning Shu said, "I don't want you to wipe it for me. I want to change the nurse." Ning Shu picked up Zhu Yanqiu's other hand and wiped it. "Now the hospital is short of manpower. I'll wipe this hand for you and leave. Next time you want a nurse to take care of you, just ask the nurse to take care of you. I've never seen a man like you, making a fuss over a little thing." Ouch. Zhu Yanqiu shook off Ning Shu's hand and felt that her wrist was really painful. The place where the nurse had wiped was very painful. A sharp pain ran through her skin. It was very painful. Ning Shu looked at Zhu Yanqiu with an extremely disgusted look. He threw the handkerchief into the basin and left with the basin. Before leaving, he muttered, "You really think you are a young master? Wiping your hand hurts. Why don't you go to heaven?" Zhu Yanqiu was so angry that her face turned blue. She shook her hand and felt that her wrist was very painful. The pain also ran to her fingertips, making her hand very swollen and painful. Ning Shu walked out of the ward and bumped into Fang Feifei, who had come to visit Zhu Yanqiu. Fang Feifei was wearing a long woolen gown and a red scarf around her neck, which made her complexion look extremely good. Ning Shu glanced at her and brushed past her. Fang Feifei turned around and called out to Ning Shu, "Nurse, wait a minute." Ning Shu held the basin and looked at Fang Feifei. Fang Feifei hesitated for a moment. Ning Shu asked, "Yanqiu, how long does that patient need to recover?" Ning Shu said very perfunctorily, "It depends on the patient's recovery. It's hard to say." Fang Feifei frowned and then asked directly, "How much does it cost when the patient is discharged from the hospital?" Ning Shu was stunned when he heard this. He glanced at Fang Feifei's beautiful face. Does Fang Feifei not want to pay for Zhu Yanqiu's medical expenses? "I'm not sure. We'll listen to the doctor. But it takes 100 days to heal the bones and meridians. His injury can't be healed in a day or two. He needs to rest well," Ning Shu said. He rolled his eyes and then said in a gossipy manner, "I heard that he is a young master of a big family and doesn't lack medical expenses." Fang Feifei glanced at Ning Shu. "How do you know that he is a young master of a big family? He wears a German watch worth 1,000 yuan. If he is not a young master, then what is he? But I don't think he has much money. Last time when you were beaten to the hospital because of the demonstration, he couldn't afford the medical expenses." Ning Shu was very gossipy, which made Fang Feifei's expression a little bad. She said a few perfunctory words to Ning Shu and then turned to enter the ward. Ning Shu sneered. "Zhu Yanqiu is spending Zhu Sunyang's hard-earned money. You are spending Zhu Sunyang's money for dating and activities. Now you can't stand it when you have to pay 5 yuan. Every time Zhu Sunyang sent money, it was 20 yuan. 20 yuan. How many tofu could she sell to get so much money?" Fang Feifei's family condition was not bad. Otherwise, her parents would not send a girl like Fang Feifei to school. But they were not rich. Otherwise, Fang Feifei would not be so distressed when she had to pay 5 yuan. Zhu Yanqiu was very generous in front of Fang Feifei. With Zhu Yanqiu's temperament, it was obvious that she was not short of money. Zhu Yanqiu never talked about her family in front of Fang Feifei. She hid that she had a wife and a child from Fang Feifei. Zhu Yanqiu's mentality was to hide it as long as she could. She wanted to spend more time with her beloved. Chapter 571. Outside the ward, Fang Feifei heard Ning Shu say that Zhu Yanqiu didn't have money to pay the medical fees before, so she stood at the door of the ward for a while, tidied up her clothes, and then walked in. Zhu Yanqiu called the doctor because of the pain in his wrist and even his fingers were swollen. The doctor saw that there was no injury or swelling on his hand, so he could only say that his body was reducing inflammation and it was normal for him to feel pain. Fang Feifei walked over and saw Zhu Yanqiu staring at his hand. She asked, "Yanqiu, what are you looking at?" Zhu Yanqiu saw that Fang Feifei was here, so he stopped worrying about his wrist. The sharp pain seemed to have dissipated. He looked at Fang Feifei softly and said, "You're here." Fang Feifei nodded and poured a glass of water for Zhu Yanqiu. She thought for a while and said, "Yanqiu, you're seriously injured. Why don't you inform your family to come and see you?" Zhu Yanqiu was drinking water. Hearing this, he choked and said quickly, "No need." Fang Feifei asked in surprise, "Why? You're seriously injured. It's best to inform your family." Zhu Yanqiu definitely wouldn't inform his family. If he did, his mother probably wouldn't come. At that time, Zhu Sunyang would definitely come to see him. What if Zhu Sunyang bumped into Fang Feifei? If Zhu Sunyang leaked something, Fang Feifei would leave him. My mother is old and the journey is so long. She can't take it by ship. If I tell her that I'm injured, it will only make her worry. I can't tell my family about this. Zhu Yanqiu explained to Fang Feifei and took her hand. When the holidays come, I want to take you home. Fang Feifei said angrily, "Who wants to go home with you? By the way, I still don't know the situation of your family." Zhu Yanqiu looked gloomy and told Fang Feifei about his family's situation. "My father was a scholar in the late Qin dynasty. He didn't become an official and started a business, but he has passed away. Now the family is supported by my mother alone, so I can't tell her about my injury. She can't leave the family business and can't come to see me. She can only worry in her heart." Zhu Yanqiu directly ignored Zhu Sunyang and Zhu Xiyuan. He didn't dare to tell the truth and say that the Zhu family was already in dire straits. Fang Feifei nodded with a smile and said, "That's good. Don't make her anxious." Ning Shu naturally didn't know what Zhu Yanqiu said. He walked into the ward with the bill and said directly to Fang Feifei, "Please pay the bill." The doctor said that the patient needs to stay in the hospital for observation for a while. Fang Feifei frowned. Ning Shu asked, "How much?" $2, Ning Shu said. "It's mainly because the anti-inflammatory medicine used by the patient is more expensive. Pay the fee." After Ning Shu finished speaking, the ward quieted down. There was an awkward atmosphere. Ning Shu didn't say anything. He just looked at the two of them. In the end, it was Zhu Yanqiu who spoke first. "Feifei, can you pay for me first? When I'm better, I'll inform my mother to send me the money." Ning Shu rolled his eyes. "Your mother is no longer around. It's more like you're looking for a psychic." Fang Feifei said, "I paid $5 before. I don't have much money left. It's not enough for $2. Let me go back and borrow from my classmates. Can you give me a few more days?" Fang Feifei said to Ning Shu, "I don't have enough money." Ning Shu saw Fang Feifei holding her small bag of jacquard lace tightly. He felt that Fang Feifei should have $2, but she didn't want to take it out. Ning Shu raised the corner of his mouth. "You have to ask the doctor. I can't make the decision. If you can't pay, the patient can only be discharged." Zhu Yanqiu really felt what it meant to be poor. She couldn't help but resent Zhu Sunyang in her heart. If Zhu Sunyang sent her money, she wouldn't be in such an embarrassing situation. Zhu Yanqiu was so embarrassed that his back was sweating. He felt that the wound on his body was even more painful, but he still had to pretend to be calm. He said to Fang Feifei, "Feifei, go and borrow money. I'll pay it back." Fang Feifei nodded and said to Zhu Yanqiu, "I'll go back to school and borrow money from my classmates." Fang Feifei said to Ning Shu, please give me a few more days. Fang Feifei turned and left after she finished speaking. Zhu Yanqiu exhaled heavily. He had never felt so difficult. It was true that a penny stumped a hero. He had never worried about money before. When he ran out of money, he would send a telegram home. But recently, the telegrams he sent out were like stones sinking into the sea. He hadn't received money from his family for more than half a year. Fortunately, he had some money before to support his basic necessities. But now he had no money. Zhu Yanqiu didn't know what to do after he was discharged from the hospital. Where could he get money from? Zhu Yanqiu rubbed his molars. He had to go home. What happened at home? Why didn't they send him money? Every time he asked Fang Feifei for money, Zhu Yanqiu felt very uncomfortable. He didn't want their relationship to change because of money. Money, money. Zhu Yanqiu's heart was full of resentment towards Zhu Sunyang. Ning Shu saw all kinds of emotions on Zhu Yanqiu's face, such as resentment, suffering, embarrassment and uneasiness. He laughed in his heart, I'll let you feel the bitterness of a poor young master. Zhu Sunyang was the only one suffering. Zhu Yanqiu and his mother didn't suffer any hardship at all. Zhu Sunyang was also stupid. She gave money to Zhu Yanqiu stupidly when he asked for money. At first, Zhu Yanqiu would make up all kinds of reasons to ask for money. Later, he didn't even bother to make up reasons and directly said that he had no money. They were all spoiled, so men couldn't be spoiled. The more they were spoiled, the more bastards they would be. Zhu Yanqiu was already depressed in his heart. Seeing this black-hearted nurse standing there and looking at him like a wooden stake, Zhu Yanqiu was so angry that he couldn't help but choke. Why are you still standing here? I don't want you to take care of me. Get out of my sight, Zhu Yanqiu roared in his heart. Ning Shu, what was this? Looking at Zhu Yanqiu's current appearance, he was no different from a cornered dog jumping over a wall. Ning Shu said lightly, I'm staying here now, waiting to pack your things. Pack what things? Zhu Yanqiu frowned and asked. I think you should be discharged from the hospital soon. You may not be able to pay the 2 yuan fee. Ning Shu's tone was firm. Zhu Yanqiu felt cold in his heart and said, I haven't recovered yet. How can I be discharged from the hospital? Besides, my girlfriend will definitely borrow the money. Zhu Yanqiu felt that he was looked down upon. He was especially angry and unwilling. At the same time, he was uneasy. He couldn't guarantee that Fang Feifei could borrow the money. Would he be driven out of the hospital with his tail between his legs? Zhu Yanqiu hated the person who robbed him that night even more. He was only left with his underwear. Zhu Yanqiu especially felt sorry for his German watch, which was the most expensive thing he had. It was his glory. Chapter 572. Ning Shu originally thought that Fang Feifei would not be able to borrow the money, but he did not expect that Fang Feifei would have enough money the next day. She had borrowed the money from her classmates, and she even signed an IOU. Knowing that she could continue to receive treatment, Zhu Yanqiu let out a sigh of relief. When she saw Ning Shu, she puffed out her chest and said proudly, Who said that I would leave the hospital soon? My girlfriend is very popular in school. She won't leave me. Ning Shu, what are you showing off for? You said it as if you don't need to pay back the money. When the time comes, how can you pay back the money? You will definitely lose face. You'd better go to Huangpu Wharf to unload the goods. Fang Feifei borrowed the money because she was not willing to pay the 2 yuan. It was not good to be involved in money disputes between boyfriends and girlfriends. When the time comes, these classmates would ask Zhu Yanqiu for money. Fang Feifei would come to the hospital to take care of Zhu Yanqiu every day when she had no classes. Her attitude was quite considerate, which made Zhu Yanqiu feel very happy. Ning Shu rarely went to Zhu Yanqiu now. He spent more time learning military medical knowledge and constantly strengthening his body. Otherwise, he would not be able to run for his life when he was in a war. Practicing fighting skills and shooting skills was to increase the chance of survival. The chaos soon would last for too long. Ning Shu had to ensure his own life until the mission was completed. Ning Shu completed all the training programs meticulously. Because of the peerless martial arts, Ning Shu was very strong. When he ran with weights, the sandbag on his body was heavier than the other 3 men. In addition, Ning Shu had money now, so he would not treat himself badly. The food was very good, and his body was not as weak as before. In the blink of an eye, it had been almost a year since they came to Shanghai. Zhu Xiyuan had reached the age to go to school. Ning Shu sent Zhu Xiyuan to school. Zhu Xiyuan had never left Ning Shu's side. He hugged Ning Shu's leg at the school gate and cried loudly. He cried and shouted for his mother not to leave him. Ning Shu comforted him, saying that his mother wouldn't abandon Xiyuan and that it was time for Xiyuan to go to school. There were many friends there. Zhu Xiyuan was a child without any sense of security. He didn't have a father in his life. When he could remember, he only had hatred for his father. He only remembered how heartless his father's mother was. When Zhu Xiyuan finished school, Ning Shu was waiting for him at the entrance of the school to take him home. Every time Zhu Xiyuan saw Ning Shu, he would throw himself into Ning Shu's arms. On the way home, Ning Shu would ask Zhu Xiyuan what he had learned today and which kid he had played well with in class. Zhu Xiyuan would tell Ning Shu everything. He was no longer as resistant to going to school as before. He also had good friends in school. Occasionally, she would fight with her classmates and complain to Ning Shu while crying. The current Zhu Si was far more lively than her lonely self from before. Ning Shu saw this and was quite happy in her heart. Zhu Xiyuan was now developing in a good direction. Other than that, Ning Shu prepared tools for himself. He had a sturdy medical kit, medical scissors, scalpels, and a sturdy belt that he could carry wherever he went. These were all things that she needed to make a living. Not only that, Ning Shu also made a set of silver needles. When necessary, he would use silver needles. The combination of Chinese and Western medicine had a good effect. Ning Shu consciously started to collect anti-inflammatory Western medicine. Occasionally, he would go to the Chinese pharmacy to buy some herbs and grind them into powder. The main purpose was to stop the bleeding quickly. Only when the bleeding was stopped could there be enough time to save the patient. The finished powder was placed in the medical kit. When he was free, he would make it and accumulate it slowly. Other than making the golden sore powder, Ning Shu made his own poison. However, the materials for making poison were hard to find. The things he made weren't very effective and weren't very toxic. Ning Shu was busy with his own things. Zhu Yanqiu had recuperated in the hospital for almost a month. She also left the hospital and was almost recovered. However, he spent a lot of money this time. When he paid for the 3rd time, it was Fang Feifei who paid for it. Ning Shu watched Zhu Yanqiu leave the hospital. Looking at his and Fang Feifei's back, Ning Shu's heart was as calm as still water. They probably wouldn't have any interactions in the future. Ning Shu touched her chest and felt uncomfortable. Zhu Su Nyang was really a lowly person. She was especially lowly in front of Zhu Yanqiu. She should have called Zhu Yanqiu Mr. and introduced him to others as, "This is my husband, my husband." However, she was afraid that Zhu Yanqiu would be angry. If others asked, she would say that she was Zhu Yanqiu's sister. The atmosphere in the country was getting tenser and tenser. The Japanese occupied the 3 provinces in the northeast. There were 2 forces in the country that were entangled and fighting a civil war. The central government's policy was to pacify the country before resisting foreign aggression. They were suppressing the red forces everywhere. Spies were rampant and assassinations and sabotage were constant. This made the situation more turbulent and uneasy. Every day, from high officials and nobles to peddlers and pawns, people were caught and sent to prison. They were suppressing people who seemed to be from the Red Forces. There were layers of dark clouds that couldn't be removed over the whole nation. The ground under their feet was moaning and wailing. Ning Shu was in such a troubled world. That kind of insignificance, that kind of suffering and pain were lingering in his heart. Everyone should do something for this suffering nation. Zhu Xiyuan asked Ning Shu for books to read. Ning Shu took Zhu Xiyuan to the bookstore to buy books without hesitation. Now, Zhu Xiyuan could recognize some words and understand some books. In this day and age, books were precious and expensive. The bookstore was basically filled with students in school uniforms or well-dressed intellectuals. When Ning Shu and Zhu Xiyuan were choosing books, they heard an uncertain and shocked voice. Zhu Sunyang. Ning Shu turned his head and saw Zhu Yanqiu. Zhu Yanqiu was holding a book in her hand and was looking at him in a daze. Ning Shu was dumbfounded. Who are you? Zhu Yanqiu's heart skipped a beat. When she saw someone who shouldn't be here appear in front of her, she felt shocked and ridiculous. Then, two words appeared in her heart. Oh no! Why are you here? Zhu Yanqiu's voice was a little loud, causing everyone in the bookstore to look at her. Zhu Yanqiu quickly walked in front of Ning Shu, grabbed Ning Shu's arm and dragged Ning Shu out of the bookstore. Ning Shu shook off Zhu Yanqiu's hand and carried Zhu Xiyuan out of the bookstore. After leaving the bookstore, Zhu Yanqiu scolded Ning Shu, "Why are you here? Where is mother? I sent you so many telegrams, why didn't you reply? You came to Shanghai without telling me. This is not a place for you to stay. Go back quickly." Ning Shu was still confused. He asked hesitantly, "You are Zhu Yanqiu?" Zhu Yanqiu said impatiently. Ning Shu immediately smiled and said happily, "Sir, I finally found you." Zhu Yanqiu frowned tightly and asked in disbelief, "What did you call me, sir?" "I think people here call their husbands sir." Ning Shu said, then turned his head and said to Zhu Xiyuan, "Xiyuan, this is your father. Your father is not dead yet. Call him father." Zhu Xiyuan. His father was not dead. Chapter 573. When Zhu Yanqiu heard Ning Shu say that she was dead and told the child that she was dead, she was very angry with Ning Shu. She reached out and hit Ning Shu hard. "Zhu Susu, I'm asking you a question. You left your mother and came to Shanghai. What if something happened to her at home? Mother is already dead. I sent you many telegrams to ask you to come back, but you didn't. Mother kept talking about you." "Xiyuan was the one who sent the coffin," Ning Shu said. "Dead?" Zhu Yanqiu staggered. "Why didn't you tell me clearly when she passed away?" "Ning Shu, I kept sending you telegrams, but you just didn't come back." Ning Shu had said this twice, but Zhu Yanqiu didn't seem to hear it. Zhu Yanqiu pulled her hair with her hands. She looked very painful and called her mother. Ning Shu curled his lips. If she really cared about Mother Zhu so much, why didn't Zhu Yanqiu come back after sending so many telegrams? Zhu Yanqiu wiped her tears and looked at Ning Shu with reddened eyes. "Why didn't you tell me you came to Shanghai? I didn't know where you were." "I couldn't find you," Ning Shu said lightly. Zhu Yanqiu looked down at Zhu Xiyuan. Zhu Xiyuan hid behind Ning Shu. Zhu Yanqiu felt that this child was very familiar. Thinking of the child who said, "You are so ugly," in the hospital, Zhu Yanqiu had complicated feelings for this child. "Where do you live now?" Zhu Yanqiu asked Ning Shu. Ning Shu was a little puzzled why Zhu Yanqiu asked this. He quickly said, "Xiyuan and I live in the tube-shaped apartment." "Sir, Can Siyuan and I move to your place? Zhu Yanqiu almost jumped up. She didn't want Zhu Susu to follow her. She said, you can live in the tube-shaped apartment first. My room is too small. It can't fit too many people. Ning Shu, fuck. Ning Shu stared at Zhu Yanqiu and didn't say anything. Zhu Yanqiu avoided Ning Shu's gaze, squatted down, and opened her hand to Zhu Siyuan. She said softly, Siyuan, come to father. Zhu Siyuan shrank behind Ning Shu and hid behind Ning Shu. He stuck his head out and looked at Zhu Yanqiu vigilantly. Seeing Zhu Siyuan like this, Zhu Yanqiu gave up trying to get closer to him. She stood up and said to Ning Shu, Sun Yang, do you have money? I sent you so many telegrams, but you didn't send me any money. Do you know what kind of life I've been living recently? Zhu Yanqiu had been having a hard time recently. She owed money to her classmate some time ago. Zhu Yanqiu pawned all her valuable things and finally paid back the money she borrowed from her classmate. However, she still owed Fang Feifei a lot of money. Zhu Yanqiu could only tell Fang Feifei that she had already informed her family. Because the current situation was too chaotic, the money was still on the way and hadn't been sent yet. Zhu Yanqiu was burning her heart every day. She didn't know how long she could keep it a secret. Zhu Yanqiu couldn't bear to go out and work. If she worked as a waitress, she would be embarrassed to death if she met her classmate. Zhu Yanqiu had created the image of a rich young master in front of her classmates. It was very uncomfortable to break the image she had created. Zhu Yanqiu was holding on like this now. Now that she suddenly saw Ning Shu, Zhu Yanqiu was relieved. At least the current predicament was solved. She asked Ning Shu for money. I was sick some time ago and spent a lot of money on medical expenses. I owe my classmate a lot of money. Give me some money to pay back the debt first. Zhu Yanqiu said to Ning Shu. She was probably asking for money. Her attitude towards Ning Shu was a little better. She said in a soft voice, when I find a bigger house, you and Siyuan can move in with me. Ning Shu asked without changing his expression, which classmate can lend you so much money? How much is the medical expenses? 10 yuan, Zhu Yanqiu said. Ning Shu, fuck off. Who lent it to you? Ning Shu asked again. Zhu Yanqiu's eyes flashed and she said, a classmate with the same interests. Ning Shu, fuck off. How much money do you have? Zhu Yanqiu asked, give me some money to pay back the money I borrowed. Ning Shu looked at Zhu Yanqiu. Such a strange person refreshed her worldview. Such a natural attitude was all because Zhu Su and Yang had spoiled her. She used to think that Miao Miao Miao's husband, Zhang Jiasen, was a scumbag. But at least Zhang Jiasen gave back to the family that provided for him. He robbed Miao Miao Miao's family by giving back. However, Zhu Yanqiu only had herself in her heart. 1 second, she was still sad that her mother had passed away. The next second, she was asking her for money. Ning Shu coughed and said sadly, I don't have any money on me. I spent a lot of money on my mother's medical expenses when she was sick. After she passed away, I spent a lot of money on her funeral. I also chose a place with good feng shui for my mother. All the money at home has been spent. Anger flashed across Zhu Yanqiu's face. She rubbed her eyebrows and asked angrily, you really don't have money? Ning Shu shook his head. I really don't have money. Siyuan and I both live in a narrow tube-shaped apartment. We can also hear the people next door snoring in their sleep and eating rotten vegetable leaves. Zhu Yanqiu stared at Ning Shu. She felt that Zhu Su Nyang's skin was fairer than before, and her face was rounder than before. She looked so good. Did she eat rotten vegetable leaves? Zhu Yanqiu's heart was burning with anger. She felt that the woman in front of her was making a fool of her and really treated her as a fool. Coupled with the frustration during this period, Zhu Yanqiu could hardly suppress the anger in her heart. Facing Zhu Sunyang, Zhu Yanqiu could lose her temper without any scruples. Zhu Sunyang, what do you mean? You took your child to the bookstore to buy books, wore good clothes, and gained weight. You said that you ate rotten vegetable leaves. Are you kidding me? Ning Shu touched his face. That's why it said that Shanghai's environment is good for people. Eating rotten vegetable leaves made me gain weight. Zhu Yanqiu was about to die of anger. Zhu Sunyang, do you think that the Zhu family will be able to make a comeback after my mother passed away? I'm your husband. How can you be so selfish? So, Ning Shu looked at Zhu Yanqiu coldly. Why didn't he think that he was already a husband and a father when he was dating Fang Feifei at this time as her husband? How much did Zhu Sunyang spoil Zhu Yanqiu? I really don't have money. Even if you kill me, I don't have money. Ning Shu spread his hands and said. Zhu Yanqiu's face was gloomy. She couldn't help but say, Zhu Sunyang, stop it, okay? I really need money now. Ning Shu looked helpless. But I really don't have money. My family has been emptied. Can I live with you? I don't have money to rent a house. How about letting Siyuan live with you? I won't live with you. Let Siyuan have a place to rest. Mother. Zhu Siyuan looked at Ning Shu with watery eyes. Ning Shu lowered his head and said to Zhu Siyuan, be good. Call me father. You can live with father in the future. You don't have to live in a shabby house with mother. Zhu Siyuan. Why couldn't he understand what his mother was saying? Chapter 574. Zhu Yanqiu originally wanted money, but now Ning Shu gave him a child. He had to go to school and didn't have time to take care of a child. Moreover, if he brought the child with him, how could he explain the child's identity to others? Zhu Yanqiu glanced at the cowering Zhu Siyuan. Hiding behind a woman made Zhu Yanqiu uncomfortable, and he didn't like the child that much. I don't have time to take care of the child at all. I'm so busy with my homework every day. What about the child? Do I just lock the child at home? Zhu Yanqiu frowned tightly. Obviously, he didn't want to accept Zhu Siyuan. Ning Shu looked troubled. Then what should I do? I can't afford to live in the tube-shaped apartment for a while. I can suffer, but the child can't suffer with me. All kinds of emotions were not enough to describe Zhu Yanqiu's feelings. What was the situation now? Was Zhu Sunyang going to ask him for money? Give me the money first, and Siyuan will live with me, Zhu Yanqiu said. Ning Shu, I really don't have money. Ning Shu spread his hands. Zhu Yanqiu was impatient. If they weren't on the street, Zhu Yanqiu would want to check her pockets to see if she had money. Zhu Yanqiu looked at Ning Shu up and down. He didn't look like he was short of money, and Zhu Siyuan was also white and tender with baby fat. How could he say that he didn't have food or a place to live? Zhu Yanqiu was irritable. He felt betrayed and said anxiously, Sunyang, I'm in a bad situation now. Give me some money first. I believe you have money. I don't have money, Ning Shu said firmly. You, Yanqiu, have you bought your books? Fang Feifei came over with a bag with a smile on her face. Hearing Fang Feifei's voice, Zhu Yanqiu's hair stood on end and his pupils trembled. His body was stiff until Fang Feifei came to his side. There was only one thought in his mind. Fang Feifei and Zhu Sunyang bumped into each other. What should he do? Fang Feifei glanced at Ning Shu and asked casually, This is? She's my sister. I'm his wife. Zhu Yanqiu and Ning Shu said at the same time, but what they said was completely different. Zhu Yanqiu looked at Ning Shu with an ashen face. Her eyes were red, and her gaze was terrifying. She looked like a wild beast that was about to devour someone. Ning Shu's face was indifferent. Whose sister gave birth to your child, raised your child, and even earned money for you to study and support your squandering? Fang Feifei was stunned. She looked at Ning Shu and then at Zhu Yanqiu. She didn't know what was going on and asked in confusion, "What do you mean?" "I'm fine." Zhu Yanqiu took Fang Feifei's hand and turned to leave. She said to Fang Feifei, "You met a crazy person." "She's crazy. She met a man and said that she was his wife. Just ignore her." "But..." Fang Feifei turned to look at Ning Shu. "She..." Ning Shu said to Zhu Siyuan, "Child, quickly call me Dad." "No, call me Dad. Call me Daddy." Zhu Siyuan called out obediently, "Daddy." When Zhu Yanqiu heard this, her face instantly turned ferocious. She looked at Ning Shu with eyes full of disgust and hatred. Obviously, she was very angry at Ning Shu for not understanding the situation. "Yanqiu, this child is calling you Dad." Fang Feifei looked at Zhu Yanqiu in confusion and uneasiness. "What's going on?" "I said she's crazy. I was just pestered by this crazy woman." Zhu Yanqiu took Fang Feifei's hand and left. Fang Feifei kept looking back at Ning Shu. Her face was full of confusion. Ning Shu waved to Zhu Yanqiu and shouted, "Sir, I'll wait for you here tomorrow." Zhu Yanqiu's figure paused. Then she took Fang Feifei's hand and left quickly. Ning Shu curled his lips. At least he had to confirm his identity. Zhu Sunyang was his wife, not some troublesome sister. "Mom, is he really my dad?" Zhu Siyuan asked in confusion. "Isn't Dad dead? Why did he suddenly come back to life?" Zhu Siyuan felt like he had been played too much. His mother said, "Siyuan, your dad is dead." Now she said, "Siyuan, call me Dad. Call me Dad. Call me Daddy." Ning Shu nodded. "It's your dad. He went to school before you were born. He never came home for so many years. I thought he was dead." Zhu Siyuan lowered his head and said, "Dad doesn't seem to like me." Ning Shu didn't know what to say. "Siyuan, not everyone likes us. What we need to do is to love ourselves better. Dad doesn't love Siyuan, but Mom does." Zhu Siyuan didn't understand. He was very confused. Ning Shu took Zhu Siyuan's hand and went home. He didn't care about Zhu Yanqiu at all. As for whether the relationship between Zhu Yanqiu and Fang Feifei would be broken because of this, Ning Shu could only shrug. It was none of his business. As for waiting for Zhu Yanqiu at the bookstore tomorrow, it was just a joke. Zhu Siyuan was in low spirits again. He had just gotten used to not having a dad, and now his dad appeared again. Then he realized that it was better not to have a dad. His dad even called his mom a lunatic. Ning Shu looked at Zhu Siyuan and didn't say anything. It was useless to say more about this kind of thing, especially at Zhu Siyuan's age. The image of a dad was like Mount Tai standing in front of the child, shielding the child from the wind and rain. Ning Shu still did her own things every day. The medicinal powder she made was almost enough to fill a medicine box, and the effect was not bad. Ning Shu tried to cut her finger and sprinkled the powder on it. The bleeding stopped very quickly. The only drawback was that it made the wound hurt and stimulated the wound a little. However, it was a life-saving medicine. This drawback could be tolerated. When Zhu Yanqiu heard Ning Shu say that he would wait for her at the entrance of the bookstore the next day, Zhu Yanqiu really went to the bookstore the next day. However, she waited from morning to noon, and Ning Shu didn't appear. Zhu Yanqiu could only wait patiently. She couldn't contact Zhu Sunyang at all now. She didn't know where Zhu Sunyang lived or where to find her. "You really came to wait for someone?" Fang Feifei walked to Zhu Yanqiu and looked at her expressionlessly. "Are you hiding something from me?" Zhu Yanqiu didn't go to class today. Fang Feifei just tried her luck to find Zhu Yanqiu, but she didn't expect that Zhu Yanqiu was really waiting for that woman here. Zhu Yanqiu immediately shook her head and said, "I'm not waiting for someone. I'm here to buy books. Yesterday, I was pestered by that lunatic woman and didn't even buy books." Fang Feifei's expression became even worse. She was very angry, but she held it back and said stiffly, "You don't have to buy books without going to class. You're waiting for that woman yesterday, right? What's your relationship? Zhu Yanqiu, make it clear." Zhu Yanqiu shook her head firmly. "Feifei, I really just came to buy books." "Then did you buy them? What kind of books would take half a day to buy? Did you not see the person you were waiting for?" Fang Feifei had a faint guess in her heart. She felt shocked and sad. Chapter 575. Fang Feifei felt that she didn't know Zhu Yanqiu at all. Zhu Yanqiu actually hid such a big thing from her. Fang Feifei wouldn't be fooled by Zhu Yanqiu's words of a madwoman. That woman was not a madwoman at all. Zhu Yanqiu already had a wife and a child. Fang Feifei tried to calm herself down and suppress the anger and sadness in her heart. She looked at Zhu Yanqiu and said, "I have the right to know the truth. Zhu Yanqiu, if you don't tell me, I'll find out the truth myself." Zhu Yanqiu scratched his head irritably with a painful and helpless expression. He quickly followed Fang Feifei and grabbed her hand. Fang Feifei shook off Zhu Yanqiu's hand and said coldly, "Zhu Yanqiu, you should know my temper. Either you tell me the truth, or we break up." Zhu Yanqiu took a deep breath and said, "I'm sorry, I lied to you." "You." Fang Feifei's face turned pale and she turned to leave. Zhu Yanqiu stood in front of Fang Feifei and said, "I know you won't forgive me, but at least listen to me. I didn't know about Zhu Sunyang's marriage. When I was 4 years old, I was sick and almost couldn't make it. My parents were superstitious and said that I would be cured if I found a child bride. Zhu Sunyang was sold to my family at that time. I didn't treat her as a wife at all. At most, she was a maid." Zhu Yanqiu explained as he took Fang Feifei's hand, "I never loved her in my heart. That child." Fang Feifei was mentally prepared in advance, but she was still hurt by the truth. Zhu Yanqiu hurriedly said, "That child was an accident. Just once, Zhu Sunyang got pregnant. Feifei, I didn't tell you this because I like you very much. I want to be with you. I wanted to tell the truth many times, but I didn't dare to take the risk. I wanted to lose you." As Zhu Yanqiu spoke, he held Fang Feifei's hand tightly, as if he was afraid that Fang Feifei would disappear. His palms were wet. Even at this moment, Zhu Yanqiu still didn't tell Fang Feifei the truth. He didn't tell her that the Zhu family had collapsed and he was no longer a rich young master. Zhu Yanqiu didn't dare to say it. If he did, Fang Feifei would definitely leave him. He had a wife and a child. What's more, he was a poor rich man. He was simply useless. Would Fang Feifei love such a Zhu Yanqiu? Zhu Yanqiu wasn't sure. Zhu Yanqiu pursed her lips tightly and placed Fang Feifei's hand on her heart. She said affectionately, "Feifei, I only have you in my heart." Fang Feifei pushed Zhu Yanqiu's hand away with an ugly expression. Zhu Yanqiu still wanted to hold Fang Feifei's hand, but Fang Feifei shook her head at Zhu Yanqiu. "Let me be alone." She turned and left. Looking at Fang Feifei's receding figure, Zhu Yanqiu angrily punched a pillar on the roadside. Her fingers suddenly felt a sharp pain. Zhu Yanqiu shook her hand with a pale face and grabbed her hair in pain. It was all Zhu Sunyang's fault. Zhu Sunyang ruined his life. Without Zhu Sunyang, Fang Feifei wouldn't treat him like this. Zhu Yanqiu really liked Fang Feifei. Fang Feifei was bright and moving. Compared with Zhu Xunyang, who was dull and knew nothing and couldn't communicate with her at all, she was much better. The most important thing was that he loved Fang Feifei and regarded Fang Feifei as his only wife in this life. Zhu Yanqiu's mood at this moment was fear and hatred. He was afraid that Fang Feifei would leave him. Of course, he hated Zhu Xunyang. Why did she appear? Zhu Yanqiu really wanted to remove Zhu Xunyang from his life like weeding weeds. For Zhu Yanqiu, Zhu Xunyang was the shame in his life, and it was a shame that couldn't be erased. Zhu Yanqiu regretted consummating with Zhu Xunyang and making her pregnant and giving birth to a child. It made everything so complicated. Too many things had happened during this period of time. He had been worrying about money all day long. Now, Zhu Xunyang had come to Shanghai and let Fang Feifei know the truth of the matter when he was unprepared. The matter that he had painstakingly concealed for so long was exposed so suddenly. Zhu Yanqiu, who waited for a long time but didn't see anyone, was very unhappy. Moreover, the person he was waiting for was Zhu Xunyang. Zhu Yanqiu was very angry. But he had no choice but to continue waiting. Anyway, things were already so bad. He had to get back from Zhu Xunyang. At least now, he had to get the money and return the medical fees that Fang Feifei paid for her. Zhu Yanqiu was now trying his best to get Fang Feifei back. Just thinking that Fang Feifei would leave him, Zhu Yanqiu felt that his life was gloomy. Did he have to spend the rest of his life with a woman like Zhu Xunyang? This was really terrible. The two of them were not on the same ideological level and couldn't communicate at all. Zhu Yanqiu shuddered at the thought of facing a boring and dull woman for the rest of his life. Zhu Yanqiu compared Fang Feifei's advantages with Zhu Xunyang's shortcomings. Zhu Xunyang was useless. Zhu Yanqiu had been waiting for Ning Shu to appear. But he waited from morning to noon, from noon to evening, and finally, when the sky was dark, Ning Shu didn't appear. Zhu Xunyang. Zhu Yanqiu gritted his teeth and shouted this name. He still didn't know that he was fooled. He was a pig. Zhu Xunyang had the courage now and dared to fool him like this. What a vicious woman. She pretended to be so gentle before, but now that there is no one in the Zhu family, she shows her true colors. Zhu Yanqiu muttered in his heart. He even felt that Zhu Xunyang ran away with the Zhu family's money. Otherwise, why didn't she contact him when she came to Shanghai? A starving camel was still bigger than a horse. Even if the Zhu family was in dire straits, they should still have some money. This money was with Zhu Xunyang. Zhu Xunyang wanted to take this money for herself and enjoy life with it. These were all the Zhu family's things. What right did Zhu Xunyang have to take them? Zhu Yanqiu thought that he had to find Zhu Xunyang no matter what. He should inherit all the Zhu family's things. When it was dark, Zhu Yanqiu could only go back. The next day, he continued to wait at the entrance of the bookstore, waiting for Ning Shu to appear. But he waited for another day in vain. Zhu Yanqiu finally realized that Zhu Xunyang wouldn't appear. There was no way for him to wait like this. Zhu Yanqiu could only think of a way. Thinking that he had seen Zhu Xiyuan in the hospital before, Zhu Yanqiu decided to go to the hospital to try his luck and ask. When Zhu Yanqiu arrived at the hospital, he asked the nurse about Zhu Xiyuan. The nurse heard it and said, "You mean Nurse Zhu's child?" Nurse Zhu. Zhu Yanqiu's pupils shrank. Zhu Xunyang became a nurse. Zhu Yanqiu felt that it was ridiculous, as if he had heard a big joke. Nurse Zhu's name is Zhu Xunyang. Yes. Zhu Yanqiu almost jumped up. Zhu Xunyang was a person who didn't know anything. She was illiterate. Did she know how to use medicine? Did she know the alphabet of Western medicine? You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.